Thank you for that. We are now recording this meeting. So, hello everyone. Welcome to CEC D2 Working Business Meeting. Today is July 30th, and we have with us here District Planning. Welcome, District Planning, and thank you very much for accommodating multiple scheduling, reschedulings. We sincerely appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over to you right away. I just want to let folks know before we start that this is a working business meeting and not a calendar meeting. And what that means is we will not have public speaking sessions. Our next calendar meeting is our August calendar meeting, and that will be a regular calendar meeting with public speaking sessions. And that is on August 11th. So, and that's on our calendar. And let's see. Are there anything else to do before we get going? I don't think so.
Hey, Maud.
Yes.
Oh, it's just Eric. Just when you're ready to start, I just had one quick thing I wanted to add when you're done.
Okay, I think I'd like to do, Vincent, can you do a roll call? Because we are not all here, so I'd like to do a roll call.
Sure, okay. So in alphabetical order, Robin Broshi.
And Robin just texted me that she's delayed for a personal reason, but hoping she could join.
Okay. Eric Goldberg, you just spoke.
Here.
So you're obviously here. Emily Hellstrom.
Yes, I'm here, although I'm having some issues with my camera.
Okay.
Sorry.
Vincent Hom, I'm here. Edward Irizarry, not present yet. Maud Marin.
I am here.
Benjamin Morden.
I'm here.
Ushma Neal.
Here.
Len Silverman.
Here.
Shino Tanakawa. We already know he's not present. Tom Rockledge.
I'm still standing.
Okay. All right. So we're expecting Robin perhaps later and have not heard from Edward.
We have everyone. You said Ushma? Ushma is here?
Yes, she is here.
Okay, wonderful. So I am going to turn it over to District Planning. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, and any screen sharing you need to do. You can, oh, sorry, Eric, you wanted to say something before District Planning began?
I mean, I just wanted to say, and not to get this off on the wrong start, but Tom, I see your name is Resign Emily, and it's just probably not appropriate for our meeting for you to name yourself that.
Thanks for your opinion, Eric. I wish
You're
Emily
welcome.
would resign because she made up lies.
Eric and Tom, we're going to go to District Planning right now. District Planning, take it away.
Hi everyone, thanks so much for having us tonight. I'm going to go ahead and share a brief presentation on my screen that hopefully everyone can see. Great. So again, thanks for having us. Maud, appreciate all the flexibility with the rescheduling on our end as well. I think the third time is working, so It's great. Here's our agenda for tonight. We'll do some quick intros, talk a little about where we are in the current context, do a brief overview of our work, and then dive into some of the data that we shared with the council. I believe it was last month at this point. So first, quick intros. I'm Jess Meller. I work on the Manhattan Planning Team in the Office of District Planning. I am here tonight with my colleagues, Eric Herman and Caitlin Widmore, who both work on the planning team as well, and Yinian Shao, who is our analyst. So the goal for tonight is to review District 2 planning data and unpack it together. This is the same data that we use in our planning work and that we used in conversations with Superintendent Chumney earlier this summer. So we're here a little bit earlier this year to have a more collaborative conversation and work together with the council to identify the needs instead of coming out in the fall and presenting what we think the needs are to you. So we are flexible tonight about what type of conversation would be most helpful, and we'll talk a bit more about that later. Before we dive in, I just wanted to talk a little bit about where we are in the current context. So I know, this current pandemic has had a huge impact on all of our communities, and it's something that we are working through. I know we all have so many questions about this coming fall and school reopening and what that's going to look like. We have so many questions, but I think what we're hoping to do tonight is to focus on the longer term needs of District 2 and think ahead to fall 2021 in the hopes that by then we are back to some semblance of normalcy in the city and in the country. We can kind of continue our planning work that way. I also wanted to point out that this pandemic has created some real financial challenges for New York City, including budget cuts at the DOE. So we just are keeping that in mind with all of our planning work to make sure that our schools are all sustainable. And again, we can talk a bit more about that later. And lastly, I do want to just recognize that we are committed to the call to dismantle systemic racism, and we are working to achieve equity and excellence through our district planning work. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Caitlin, who's going to talk very quickly about the work in our office.
Hello, thank you all for having me. So the Office of District Planning is committed to equity and excellence by focusing its efforts on community partnerships and empowerment, increasing access to quality schools and programs, increasing diversity, and improving learning conditions for all students. So this is an overview of the Office of District Planning's workflow. It's a cyclical process where we first determine needs for each district internally, then we externally meet with superintendents, DOE partner offices, and CECs. After that, we meet with councils, school communities, and other stakeholders to assess potential scenarios and district needs further. So currently we're in the process of meeting with CECs, such as yourselves, to get their input and thoughts on how to better flesh out what are the most important needs for each district. So listed here are a few of the levers district planning has utilized in the past, such as in District 2, the opening and subsequent rezoning of 75 Morton, creating new programs such as dual language programming and ASD Horizon and NEST programs, school mergers, resightings, and enrollment planning, etc. So these are a few of the guiding questions that we just want to keep in mind while diving into some of District 2's data. So we're trying to partner with you all in order to be thoughtful of how we can ensure we serve each student in the district well, especially given the current circumstances. So I think we're gonna put these questions into the chat to consider during the data presentation if possible.
Great, thank you so much, Caitlin and Jess, and thanks for the CEC for having us tonight. You know, I think this conversation today can go in a lot of different directions. I'm happy to defer to the CEC sort of what is best. You know, we sent you the data, I forget how long ago, so hopefully you have reviewed the summary, and happy to like turn just to answering questions that might have come up in that data summary right away. Happy to jump into sort of needs that you guys have identified on your own and talking about those, or happy to turning to the summary and sort of us kickstarting the conversation with like identifying a few of the needs that we see and starting the conversation like that. So I'd defer to the council and sort of where you'd like to begin this evening.
Thanks, Eric. I think if there are any council members who have a particular question that they want to ask first off, I'll let them share those, but then I'd really like to have the presentation first so that everybody is getting that presentation. So council members, you can unmute yourself if you have a particular question, otherwise we'll jump right into the presentation.
And Jess can share her screen with the data summary, so if there are particular pages that you guys have in front of you that you want us to reference, just call that out so that we can show to the group and reference those.
Yeah, just trying to get that set up. Give
Emily, are you trying to speak? I don't know if Emily's waving to one of her kids or trying to talk to us. Sorry guys, let me just check in. Ask to unmute.
Hey,
Hi,
sorry,
Emily,
just
sorry.
Emily,
okay. were you not able to unmute yourself?
I was not able to unmute myself.
Okay,
I don't know.
Okay.
Don't know why. That's okay. I just, at some point in the beginning or the end, I just would like to talk about the Bleecker School and how I know that you're not the SEA and that it's in the budget, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, what being fully funded means and how that can actually come to fruition. Obviously, this is a very precarious budget year and possibly more than 1 year. But I just don't want to let that slide under because does have a deadline. So.
Emily, we're happy to speak to that now briefly.
Great.
Like you said, we are not the SEA, so I can tell you what we know, which unfortunately may not be everything you want to know.
Sure.
But the February version, which is the latest version of SEA's capital plan, did show a DOE commitment to utilizing the Bleecker Street site for a new school, pending funding, and it indicated that would likely be in the next version of the capital plan, so that 2024, 2028 capital plan. That is all I know for now. We are happy to circle back with the SCA. I think we have a conversation with the superintendent that the SCA will be a part of in a few weeks, and ask for some more information about that superintendent Chumney should be able to share back with you if that's okay.
That would be great. The reason that I want to know, because basically the way that the letter, sort of the exercising the option reads with NYU is that it does have to be fully funded by a certain period of time. So I just don't want it to be sort of a semantic sleight of hand where it's in the capital budget, not fully funded, and therefore NYU can sort of wriggle out of their commitment because they would like to. So, and I don't want them to. So I would love it if you could do that. And if you know, us writing a letter, or if there's any, you know, weight that we can bring to the conversation, or even being in the conversation would help. I would glad to make myself available.
Great. So just what I'm writing down
Jess.
is when does that site need to be fully funded, and how can the community help?
Yes, exactly. I have those numbers, and maybe I'll get your email, and I can email you some of the stuff that we have on that. So.
Yeah, that would be great.
Great. Thanks so much, Jess. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Other questions about the data or other planning needs?
Yeah, I have a question. Tom Rockledge. One of the prongs you showed before was equity. How much money do you dedicate to anti-racism training as part of that equity campaign for district planning?
So I don't know if I can answer that question, Tom. You know, the DOE sponsors training on equity and anti-bias. That's done centrally, typically.
Okay, just so you know, one of the anti-racist training classes was conducted in 2018, was conducted by Terrence Winters. Terrence Winters, who now sits on the New York City Commission for Human Rights, compared the relationship between myself and my Black girlfriend to that of Thomas Jefferson and the slave that he raped. Do you support that?
Hey, Tom, we're going to go right into the presentation now. Jess, can you please walk us through the data?
Sure. So Maud, our intention today, I don't think, was to walk through all of the data, but would it be helpful as a baseline to do that briefly, or should we kind of start with the stuff that we want to point out? I
think it'd be super helpful to walk through it, and we can hold all questions to the end so that we can go through it somewhat quickly.
Okay, that sounds good. So we're going to just go through the data pretty quickly.
Yeah,
this is a summary. Great. Sure. This was a summary that was shared with the council. There is a detailed table of contents, so it's a little long. You can find what you're looking for. And at the beginning of each section, we have some guiding questions to kind of guide your thinking through the data. Caitlin, would you be able to quickly just walk through some of these enrollment trends? Happy to do it if you'd like me to.
Yeah, I think Jess, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure, yeah, no problem. So just very briefly, this shows district enrollment over the last 5 years. And overall, District 2 has seen a slight increase in total enrollment since 2014-15 of, about 2,600 kids total. And we've seen the growth primarily at the middle school level. This next chart breaks down enrollment at the district and charter level for the district over the last 3 years. So you can see over the last 3 years at the elementary school level, enrollment has been pretty flat, same at the charter school level, some small changes here and there. And then, like I mentioned, at the 6 to 8 level, we are seeing this larger increase across both district and charter schools.
Hey Jess.
Yeah.
Is that a retention issue where you're seeing less of a drop off from the 5th to 6th grade transition, or do you see increased enrollment at the 6th grade? And maybe you didn't look to that level, but I was just curious what's driving that increase?
That's a great, go ahead, Eric.
Hey, Eric.
That was it. Yeah.
So I think what this has to do is not necessarily with upticks in retention in the district. I think the retention numbers have been pretty consistent. I don't have those with me tonight. I think this has to do with larger incoming numbers articulating through the system. So not like students coming from outside of the district, not necessarily an uptick in the amount of students or the percentage of students that are coming from 5th to 6th, but just the amount of students as a whole in the system and moving through it.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so Caitlin, I'll call you into this next page. Talk about enrollment range, thank you.
Yeah, so this chart at the top of the page shows schools in District 2 by their student enrollment counts. So in District 2, there's 6 schools serving students in elementary and middle school grades, and 5 schools serving students in high school grades with under 250 students. And this doesn't include transfer high schools, but 250 is generally a number we use as a marker to monitor these schools' enrollments and make sure that their populations remain at a sustainable size. So a data trend that we thought important to highlight is the graph here, which contains the 6 Chinatown elementary schools, each of which have seen a decline in enrollment over the last 5 years. So PS1, PS2, PS42, PS124, PS126, and PS130 have experienced an enrollment decline over the last 5 years. And in particular, PS1 now has enrollment below 250 students.
Are you seeing that students that would typically go to these schools are turning to charters or are going to other schools within the district?
You know, I don't know if we've examined the retention rate so much as where students are leaving for, but I can tell you something that we have particularly noticed is just that the amount of students living in this area, so the school age kindergarten students living in these 6 zones, has been going down. But that would be another interesting data point besides the fact that if the size of the amount of the students is going down, but also if there's an increased amount of students leaving the zones that there are these schools to either go to charters or to go to other schools in the district. So that is a data point we can pull for you in terms of what the zone retentions are for these schools over, say, like the last 2, 3, 4 years.
And Eric is another driver potentially. I think around this time, there started to be greater focus on only enrolling in district students in certain schools, as opposed to students who were out of district and desiring a school either in Chinatown or in District 2. So I think sometimes there's that number, I forget the opposite. It's not just in-zone retention, but also what percentage of students are in district or in zone for a school. And I'm just wondering if that mix has changed over time. Anyway, just something to throw out there.
Something to think about. I'm not sure about that data point either in terms of if those schools were, like, would the enrollment trend be more flat if they had, or like, were allowed to take more students, say, from Brooklyn or Queens or District 1 or something like that.
Right. So basically the question is zoned enrollment flat, despite the fact that overall enrollment is going down? It may be interesting to see.
Eric is actually right. So those schools used to take a lot of children from the outer boroughs, And when that practice was stopped, their enrollment started trending down.
Interesting.
Thanks, Jennifer.
You're
So
welcome.
combination of a lot of different things.
So moving on to something else we look at is average class size across each grade span. And what we're seeing in District 2 is a slightly higher than average class size compared to the whole borough of Manhattan at each grade span. This next set of charts shows where District 2 enrolled students live. So you can see for elementary school, 88% of district school students live in district, and 76% of middle school students live in district. And breaking that down a little bit more, we also look at the way that breaks down at the charter level. So District 2 residents in grades K to 8 are choosing to enroll in district schools in very large numbers. Only 7% of K to 5 and 4% of 6 to 8 students are choosing charter schools, either in or out of the district. This next set of charts shows where elementary residents in the district are enrolled. So 91% of District 2 elementary school students choose to attend a school in district, compared to 90% of middle school students. Very high numbers for the city. The next section is seat demand. So I'm going to turn it over to Caitlin to talk through the demand and capacity charts.
Sure. So this graph shows how many elementary school seats are available in District 2 compared to their enrollment trends over time. So this is for district schools only, and the bars at the bottom for 2020 on are actual and projected enrollment, and the pink line is the actual and projected capacity. It's not taking social distancing into account. It's based purely on the Blue Book and SEA's projections. So what we see here is we have some schools in the district that are crowded and some that are not crowded, and we're projecting a need for seats overall in the future. So new capacity is expected to open for the 2022-2023 school year at Trinity Place, and in subsequent years at Western Rail Yards and Hudson Square, which Eric is going to dive into a little bit later.
Excuse me.
Hey. Oh.
Yes. Is there a question?
Oh, I was going to ask a quick question, but I thought I heard someone else about to ask something. Nope.
Yes,
Okay.
Caitlin, yes, those numbers don't reflect the post-COVID-19 projections. People either moving out or moving from private schools to back to public schools, or?
Correct, they do not.
Okay. And Caitlin, I was just going to add in that section, I always forget when we look at capacity, I know the Blue Book calculation has changed and I forget where it ended up. Do we look at capacity by contract for excellence numbers? I know that there's maybe two other choices, but I forget how we look at capacity. Is it 32 per class in grades 3 and above, or just if you have that information?
So this is based on the Blue Book, which has they use lower numbers than the UFT contractual max, which you are referencing, and
that's what I meant. Yes. Yep.
So this is based on the Blue Book, which I believe uses, like, I'm forgetting the numbers. It's on the one of the other pages. I think it's on the 2 pages down from here, but it's like 18 for kindergarten. Where is it? It's on that next page here, right? The programming.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Right.
25
and it was the
for
UFT.
kindergarten.
Great. It was the UFT that they're not using anymore, but it's not the C4E. It's sort of a hybrid in the middle. Perfect. But this is what I wanted to see, the 25 and the 28. Okay.
18 is for pre-K.
Great.
Yeah. Other questions about this elementary school demand and capacity chart? Okay.
So this is the same graph, but for middle school demand and capacity. And what we also see here is middle school enrollment is also expected to increase over the next few years, particularly beginning 2023 on. So in order to help meet this need, we're anticipating that some Western rail yard capacity is going to be used for middle school seats and is expected to come online year TBD.
I don't know if we want to hop right down to sort of what those numbers are. That's kind of on a couple pages later, if that would be helpful, Maud, or if we should just keep going.
I think it'd be great to look at those numbers.
Yeah.
To look at the new sites, yes? Okay.
Yeah, so what Caitlin was referencing is that there are 3 new sites that are funded in the capital plan. It's Trinity Place, it's Western Rail Yards, and it's Hudson Square. The Trinity Place site, which is down by the Battery Tunnel, which is where we anticipate PS 150 to be resited to, is supposed to come online in the 2022 school year. We'll increase the elementary school capacity in District 2 so that we will stay in front of those projected numbers in terms of seat need. Then the other 2 sites we have, which is Hudson Square, which is, well, right, Hudson Square, which is that like right north of Canal Street area, which is in the Tribeca Village subzone. Will also create seats in that area. And then what Caitlin was referencing in terms of middle school seats, there are some funded seats for both elementary and middle school as part of the Western Rail Yard sites, and we are not sure when those seats will be coming online, but they are funded and should be happening in the future.
So Eric, I had a question on that because my understanding was with the Hudson Square site, there were certain trigger clauses that would actually, you know, the owner of that property doesn't need to build anything there if they choose not to. If they do choose to build something, that would trigger the some obligation to build a school, correct?
That's like, it sounds correct because typically what happens with the SCA is that like if a developer builds a building and they deliver what they call a core and shell to the DO,
Right.
we are responsible for finishing the building and outfitting it as a school. So if nothing gets built there, then that sounds like nothing's going to get built there.
Right. I'm not aware that there's any plans right now. I could be wrong. I haven't looked into it recently, but I'm not aware of any plans that have gone forward in terms of building anything there. So in terms of the seat capacity that the district would need, that's not a site that we could, let's say, rely on for providing seats because they may choose not to build anything for the next decade, in which case, you know, we need sites that can deliver seats.
Yeah.
Of course, this is all presuming that half the people in Manhattan don't leave, but if we still have folks in Manhattan.
As a hypothetical,
right.
In this, the seats are funded and there is a projected need in the area. So I don't think the money disappears, but you're right, the site would disappear and that we'd have to find another site.
Okay.
Now, Bleecker Street is in that area.
Correct.
And so maybe if that does happen, there would be some transitioning of funding to that site. I don't know if that's true or how it works, but I'm just playing a hypothetical game of like maybe that's how the funding for that site becomes available. I'm not quite sure. We can connect with the SCA on sort of the status of that development, the developer, when they're putting, you know, a shovel in the ground, or, you know, is it, you know, funding that's holding it up or something else.
Right.
And
I
so
can reach out to SCA as well, but if you guys speak to them before I do, which you very well may, then if you could ask them if there is any update on that information.
We can make a race.
Thank you. And then let me ask you one other question.
Western Rail too. Yeah, Western Rail I think is the same situation.
Okay. And then my other question is, Councilmember Kalos talks about designated funding for seats on the Upper East Side, and I don't see that listed here.
Yeah, so that's below here. There is a funded seat need for 824. I believe it's all elementary school seats on the Upper East Side.
Okay.
The site has not been identified, but there is funding in that capital plan for seats on the Upper East Side.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions on new capacity, capital plan, SCA stuff? Otherwise, we'll hop back up to some more enrollment data.
None for me.
Great. Okay. So this next section is a section count analysis. This is just one way to think about district-wide seat availability and programming efficiency. So what we'll see here is the total enrollment at each grade level in the district, the minimum number of sections based on that class size we discussed before to serve all of those students in the actual sections that are there. So what you'll see, for example, in kindergarten is that to serve those 3,108 District 2 students in this past school year, we needed 125 sections, where in the district there was actually 138, which basically shows that there, with more efficient programming in a perfect world, there could be 13 fewer sections. I will share with you all that we are seeing kind of this percentage in every single district that we work in Manhattan, and understand that this is just one measure of programming efficiency. So next we'll move on to, go ahead, Eric.
And Jess, I was just gonna say it's interesting, right? So as you get, go up through 8th grade, it looks like it reverses.
That's where things start to get a little more crowded, which I think is in line with the trends that we saw before with the increasing enrollment, right?
And just to pause for a second. So in 8th grade, for instance, it says the minimum number of sections would be 96, but there's actually only 90 sections. So that would be an indication of classroom crowding, I guess, because the class sizes are larger than the 28.
Exactly.
Okay.
Your middle school average class size is probably closer to the 33, which is the UFT contractual max for a non-Title I school, which is the majority of schools at the middle school level, I think, in District 2. And so,
And did I misunderstand some of your earlier graphs that showed that there was excess capacity in the middle school?
So I can go back up to our demand
right here
capacity chart.
I mean, so there's a disconnect between those two sets of data, is there not?
Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. There is a slight disconnect there, and we can drill down a little bit more into that after this call to try to understand what could be driving that.
Can I give a hypothesis? I can go ahead, Eric.
So the reason why I believe that there's a disconnect here is because of the way that they're calculating like the class size. And so district, like this is based on the Blue Book, which is using an average class size, which is smaller than how most District 2 schools are actually programming. And so most District 2 schools are actually filling close, your SOCs and your labs have 33 students in a class, and an array of other schools as well. And so this Blue Book capacity is sort of underestimating actually how many students a lot of your schools can actually hold based on that contractual max.
So then I would just be very careful then when it comes to district planning that you use the actual data rather than these projections, because this is extremely misleading. And if this is published, then people from other districts might say, why can't my kid go to a D2 middle school? There's excess capacity. So please, just a note of caution, please.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think we next like to move into the demographic section. So this chart shows District 2 enrollment by race at each grade span compared to Manhattan and the city. So what you can see here is that District 2 serves a much larger percentage of white students, especially at the elementary and middle school level compared to Manhattan and the city overall. And then we
and just to pause there, to explain. So for high school, that's because you're including all District 2 cited high schools, which in a citywide model includes students from across the city, whereas the K-8 population is mainly District 2 residents, as you showed before at that 90% retention rate. Okay.
Yes, exactly, Eric. So these are students who are attending schools in District 2. We have now a 2-page chart showing this race breakdown at every school serving elementary school grades in the district. It is quite long. So I think that for the sake of time tonight, I would encourage the council to review this on their own instead of going through line by line. We have this for 2 pages of elementary school, followed by 2 pages of middle school. Yeah.
A quick question for how are you coding people who are 2 or more races?
I believe they are classified in this other. So if based on the way that families are filling out that survey, I just will point out that there is some variation across all District 2 schools. So worth kind of looking at line by line. And then we have the same chart for middle school. I think we're seeing similar trends. Some schools serving very different populations in terms of race than others.
And hey, Jess, what kind of work does your team do or work with other groups within the DOE when you look at some of these, race ethnicity breakdowns by school? Is there anything that you're looking for in terms of, concentration, diversity, or things that, when you put a report like this together that, get shared out other than with us?
Yeah, I mean, this is data that we share with the council and with the superintendent. I think we rely on our colleagues in other offices like enrollment to think about some of those larger policy changes that I think, Eric, that you might be alluding to.
Yeah, I was just curious how it gets sort of fed up.
Yeah.
I mean, I could jump in terms of like how our office sort of looks at demographic data and we typically look at district averages or areas around the district, and if there are opportunities to do rezonings of schools and to increase diversity or increase sort of equity in schools, we can do that. And so that's something that we can have conversations about if we choose to move forward with creating a zone for PS 150, and if there are opportunities to increase diversity at that school when it's recited, if that is chosen to be a zoned school, or if we would like to explore making it a zoned school, or if there are any other opportunities throughout the district where we think that one school, where there are opportunities to maybe increase diversity across a set of schools through a rezoning by equalizing percentages of students of different races across the zone. So there might be pockets of the district that we could consider doing that, not just to alleviate overcrowding, but to increase diversity at our schools.
Thanks, Eric. And just to follow up a little bit more about PS 150 and Trinity Place and the potential reciting, I think something we will want to work with the council on, assuming that project is still on schedule for 2022, later this school year, either in the winter or the spring, start having a conversation about what that new expanded PS 150 could look like, and if that school, how we want that school to function, either as a choice school or a zoned school.
Right, and right now PS 150 is currently a choice school.
Yes, exactly. Okay, so the next few charts break down District 2 averages over a couple of different breakdowns. This first chart shows students with disabilities. So 18% of District 2 students in grades K to 8 have IEPs, which is slightly lower than Manhattan and the citywide average. We also have this chart for students who are economically disadvantaged. That's 32% of K to 8 students in District 2, compared to 62% in Manhattan. And then for students who are English language learners, 7% in District 2 in grades K to 8 compared to 10% in Manhattan and 15% citywide. This next chart shows District 75 breakdown in District 2. So the way that we look at this chart is, and the way we think about District 75 is how many District 2 residents in each grade span qualify for District 75 services, and how many seats are there in that district, with the intention of as many students as possible who qualify for these services being served close to home. And in District 2, there's a much larger number of seats than District 75 students. So 164 students at the elementary school level for 462 seats. So right now we're seeing no deficit across the district, which is great. And this next chart shows students in temporary housing in District
Jess,
2.
sorry to keep interjecting, but
No,
when you see that gap in capacity, is that then made available Manhattan and citywide?
Exactly.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so Eric, there are a lot of students, because, I mean, quite frankly, there are a significant deficit of seats in a lot of our upper Manhattan districts, particularly 4, 5, and 6 at varying different levels. And so a lot of students from upper Manhattan are actually traveling to District 2. There's no sort of district priority for District 75 in terms of where students go to school. And so we like to serve kids as close to home as possible, but because of the amount of seats that are available in District 2 and the deficit that we have in upper Manhattan, we see a lot of students coming from other parts of Manhattan to go to school in District 2, and we wouldn't consider this like an opportunity. Like, those seats are full for the most part.
Yeah.
We've been adding District 75 seats through like new school proposals and new site proposals, I believe, for like the last 4 or 5 years. And I think we did one in District 4 this year. We did one in District 6 2 years ago, and then 3 years ago, and then District 5. And we'll probably continue to do that as much as possible to sort of offset like the continued need for District 75 seats that is growing in Manhattan and actually around the city.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
So this next chart shows students in temporary housing in District 2 compared to the borough and the city. You'll see that District 2 is serving a lower percentage of students in temporary housing compared to Manhattan and the city. And then we have a couple of schools listed here that serve more than 10%, that have more than 10% of their students living in temporary housing, or District 2 schools. Eric, can I turn it over to you for the schools and programs section?
Yeah, sure. So this is, simply the list of district schools, the charter schools in District 2 compared to Manhattan. District 2 is a very large district, as you can see, with a lot of schools. I think something particular to highlight here sort of is that 54 high schools that are being served in District 2. And as Eric alluded to before, those schools are largely filled with a lot of students coming from around Manhattan and out from outside the city as well. There also are a lot of elementary schools, and this really speaks to the size of District 2, which is the largest district in Manhattan. This is a list of the different types of programs. So Caitlin alluded to before, one of the things our office works on is where we can support in adding programs to districts. So that could be Horizon programs, that could be bilingual programs, dual language programs. So this is sort of the list of programs that District 2 offers for students. I actually think Caitlin was going to take the performance side.
Yeah. So these graphs measure average academic performance in District 2 compared to Manhattan and citywide averages for grades 3 through 8. So the gray bars on the left show District 2's performance. So District 2's average language arts and math proficiency rates are significantly above the Manhattan and citywide averages. And the district's 4-year graduation rate is also above the borough and city averages. So something new we're looking at this year are impact scores. So this graph shows how District 2 elementary schools are performing compared to other schools who serve similar student populations. So schools that are at or over the 0.5 score here on the bottom are considered higher performing compared to other schools who serve similar student populations. So this isn't just District 2 residents, it's any students being served within a District 2 school. So just as an example, the River School at the top has an impact score of close to 1.0, so it's considered high performing compared to other schools serving similar student populations. So as you can see here, the majority of schools serving elementary grades in District 2 have an impact score at or above 0.5. So to us, this suggests high performance compared to other schools serving similar student populations. However, these impact scores don't always paint the entire picture for how a school is doing, and they don't always tell the entire story. And then this graph shows the impact scores, but at the middle school level, and the majority of District 2 schools serving middle school grades have an impact score over or at or above 0.5, which also suggests strong performance compared to schools serving similar student populations.
And these middle schools are including schools that are not currently within Community School District 2, I'm noticing. For example, Quest to Learn, School of the Future, and Professional Performing Arts High School, those three are not Community School District 2 schools.
These are all the schools that are physically located in District 2.
Got it.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out, Donalda. I think we'll turn it back to Eric for the buildings and capacity section.
Sorry, my daughter just came in to say goodnight to me.
You can go say goodnight to her if you want. We can,
No.
we can chat amongst ourselves for a little while.
It was quick, but I've now lost where we are in terms of the presentation, in terms of demand and capacity.
So we're in the space section if we want to start here, Eric.
Oh, yes, of course. So this is the building summary for the district as compared to Manhattan. So the amount of buildings that are in District 2, the amount with TCUs, and then the amount of underutilized buildings as well as overutilized buildings. So that what this slide shows is the underutilized buildings in District 2. And so we have a fair amount of buildings that are actually on that UU list. It's a list that is calculated by taking the Blue Book capacity and then the enrollments of the schools in that building. And sort of calculating if there are 300 plus seats available in this building or 150 plus seats available in the building. So the top of this chart is the buildings with 300 plus available seats, and the bottom are the ones with 150 to 299. I just want to sort of point out that just because there is a substantial amount of space or excess seats in the building doesn't mean that there is necessarily room to open up another school or resite a school to these buildings. For example, I'll just use the top one, which is M535. It's the Park West building. It's a building that I believe has 6 high schools. And so each of the schools in that building have, I believe, anywhere from 5 to 7, 10 excess rooms individually, but the schools are spread out on different floors of the building. And it would be very difficult to capture that space as a whole to say, cite another school. So those schools have room to grow to add additional students, but in terms of say using that space to open up a new school or a District 75 program, it might be difficult to do, even though it's showing that there are 1,000 excess seats available in that building. And so I think there are several large high school buildings across District 2. M620 is Norman Thomas, M520 is Murray Bertram, where we are showing that there are a decent amount of seats available in the building, but that doesn't necessarily equate to a ton of usable space in terms of being able to add schools. I mean, without significant reconfiguration or funding to do that or, build out the schools. And that, Eric, did I hear you asking a question?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is obviously an ongoing source of, some frustration. It's just when we see these charts and we see all of this space and that it's in some way deemed unusable or that you can't configure it. Not only in light of some of the COVID, related space issues we're facing, but prior to that, when we look at some of the constraints of some of our smaller high schools or smaller schools that potentially could be looking to grow, So what is a way to actually, I guess, think about this space and how we could use it? And I know that there's hurdles and obstacles, but I just feel like this is a piece that's been amiss for a while in terms of unlocking this space.
I mean, this is, our office, as well as with the Office of Space Planning, like really dives in and takes a look at the configuration of these buildings on a almost yearly basis in terms of examining sort of the enrollment trends of the schools and how we can use the excess in these buildings. And we continue to monitor it because enrollment does go up and down at a lot of these schools, and there might be opportunities where space could be utilized in the future, but we haven't really seen one at now or necessarily identified a need to put something into those buildings either. So, I know, I don't believe we share floor plans, but always happy to sort of walk through like the high level of like where schools might be in a building and like what our thinking is and why it might be difficult to resite a school if you have an idea, or open up a school that would need to be of a certain size in a specific building.
Yeah, just to piggyback on what Eric said, I think we're always happy to entertain specific conversations about buildings and space and share a little bit more than what's in these charts, if that would be helpful.
Thank you.
These are overutilized spaces in the district. So this is where enrollment in a building might exceed the capacity. And so there are a decent amount of schools, particularly in District 2, that are on the overutilized list. One of the things that our office particularly looks at here is just that are these schools in these buildings able to accommodate all of their zone students, particularly at the elementary school level. And so we do have a fair amount of elementary school buildings on this list, but aren't seeing a ton of schools in District 2 that have zoned wait lists or cap and overflow students on a regular basis. I know 40 is a school that we are continuously monitoring because they are, them and SAC, who are co-located in that building, really are tight on space. And if enrollment trends continue to happen at sort of the level that they have been in recent years, particularly with the popularity that Stuyvesant Town has had, like we might need to reconsider as a rezoning in that area to alleviate crowding and to spread students to other districts. I don't think that this is something that, we've had conversations with the superintendent and the principal in past years, and some years they have a zoned wait list and some years they don't. And so we are monitoring this, but right now haven't felt like it's a need. And then particularly with COVID, we really want to monitor sort of the trends of what's going to happen with students in that zone.
Can I ask a naive question? At what point does monitoring become action?
So, I mean, we've probably been having conversations with that Principal Felder, and the superintendent year over year, and we're making sure that the school has its instructional footprint. So we use the citywide instructional footprint to determine if a school can serve all of its students and has the space it needs. That school has been, we've had to reduce their pre-K seats there to serve their kindergarten students. I think that if they say needed to serve, if we want to get really granular at PS40, if their zone size grew, that we were anticipating a 6th section of students consistently, they've served 5 full sections recently, that would really create a problem at that school. And that's sort of the tipping point that our office has really been looking at. And so they've served 5 full sections, that collapses down to 4 based on contractual maxes and how things articulate through. And if that school is year over year was having a zoned wait list and not able to needing to fill with the 6th section, which that building can accommodate, with SALC in particular, or in that building, we would need to redraw the zone lines to make sure that that school could accommodate all of its own students, and we would look to take advantage of capacity at the surrounding schools. So that could be 116, that could go as far up as 281. We've done rezonings in District 2, as well as in other districts that have encompassed 3 or 4 or 5 different schools. District 3, I think we did 10 schools where we got new capacity and cascaded a rezoning up the entire Upper West Side. And so that was a long answer. I apologize.
No, but it was the right one. But it seems to me that if this is something you've been monitoring for 4 or 5 years, it might be actually time for action.
Maybe.
And especially looking at a capacity of 143%.
Yeah.
Well, Ushma, the interesting thing is the school was rezoned 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes, 40. So we rezoned it, right? I forget. I think it was 5 years ago, maybe 6 at this point. You know, both shrinking the 40 zone, giving some to 340 when Foundling opened, and some to 116.
Yeah.
So,
it is not something that we have particularly heard from the principal or that school community that they're feeling like obscenely tight. And we do believe that they have what they're entitled to in terms of space in that building. So I understand that the percentage is a little daunting in terms of the 143%, and it definitely stands out to us. And that's why we dive in and look at sort of what the needs are at the school. And sort of examine sort of what we think is that like tipping point in terms of zone size and what would not be able to accommodate moving through at the school, and what would create a situation where you would have like students in their cluster space and you would lose a music room or an art room or a dance room or a space like that. But right now they're able to operate with their full cluster space and haven't lost that yet. We haven't gotten to that point.
Quick other point of clarification though, there's 2 other schools that are even more crowded. What is, just forgive my lack of knowledge, what's 661 and what's 840?
661 is a transfer high school that serves students, I think, in multi-shifts. So some kids in the morning, some kids in the afternoon. And so their enrollment is going to look very high compared to their capacity, but the way that they're enrolling students is they're in there on 2 different sessions. So I think that number is really misleading. 840, I believe, is PS 150, which is a very, very small school, 1 section a grade. And I think what we typically see in these very small schools is that the number is always going to look, the crowding is always going to look much bigger than it actually is. Just kind of based on how that school is using the very limited amount of space that they have.
Yeah, PS 150 is an overcrowded school, no doubt about it. They don't have their cluster rooms. They don't have as many admin spaces as they technically need. That's a fact.
Then why is it listed as 840?
Building codes don't always meet up with DBMs. It's weird and confusing, and I don't know how they assign numbers to buildings, but that's what they gave them.
I just want to add one other point on PS 40, because they draw a lot of their students from Stuyvesant and Peter Cooper, which have a large number of rentals. They have lost a lot of students, as many of our elementary schools have this year. People are leaving the city. We'll see what happens, you know, when September comes, but there's room.
Yeah, so our office will definitely take a dive into sort of the impact of these enrollment trends and what's happening in these buildings.
Yep, we're looking at enrollment numbers throughout the school year to kind of keep an eye on how things are going. But hear you, that 143% does look pretty alarming.
Jess and Eric, do you guys know when you will have the first available data in terms of any enrollment declines due to COVID?
I would actually see what Donalda and Jennifer think about that. We typically look at enrollment data beginning in October with audited register. So that would be our date would be October, the end of October, when we have that data available.
Yeah.
It's usually after October 31st.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can sort of take a peek and, you know, live ATS and stuff like that when the school begins to sort of tip us off on what's happening,
right?
Which I know I'm definitely going to do. I don't know, you know, if that is data that we can share, but it definitely will let us know sort of where things are happening. By the 3rd week of school or 4th week of school, you know, we're not seeing too many students coming in and out. And so I think we'll have a pretty good sense by early October. what's happening. And I think, you know, the principals will speak, and you guys will also probably sort of understand what the pulse is on the ground too.
Right.
I mean, I've already heard from a number of elementary schools in particular that they already have, you know, 50 to 74 was the highest I heard of families saying that they're not returning to the school, that they're leaving New York City. So
that
it's
is
frightening. It's really
much
frightening.
larger than I could have imagined.
Yeah, it is frightening. When I heard the first 50, I thought that was the top. And then another PC said, no, we're up to 74. So
Crazy.
some of these overutilization numbers will probably go down.
Yeah.
What are you hearing at the middle school level, Jennifer?
Not as much, not as much. And there are also families who have not told anybody anything at this point. You know, they're going to wait till the fall to see what happens and then maybe make their decision. I think people had an opportunity to see what life was like outside of New York City, and some of them decided, you know what, with everything going on, we're going to leave.
That being said, I imagine that there's always that trend. I mean, I know even just at my own children's elementary school, there is sort of like that pyramid thing where lots of kids in kindergarten, and then the sections decrease as well. I mean, is that possible?
Say that again?
So just speaking to like the articulation of students leaving the system between K and 5, right? Is that right, Emily?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
so
mean, I just know that that's the trend in our school and has always been.
yeah, I think there's a trend of that across district too. I don't want to say it's in every school, but there is sort of an attrition from K to 5 in District 2 that happens at a lot of schools.
Right, but it's much higher than it usually is.
Right. From talking to parents in the district, there's just so much uncertainty about what the DOE plans on doing, so many different plans, that they can't make any decisions because the schools aren't exactly sure what they're going to do. And to be honest, I mean, a lot of people think that the schools aren't going to reopen. So, I mean, maybe that affords you the possibility for utilization to actually distribute kids evenly across classes, maybe instead of being committed to physical spaces, think about how you could do things virtually. I don't know. I would think that might be helpful, just in case we don't go back, which a lot of school districts aren't, including places like Columbia University. So maybe have a plan B. That would be my suggestion.
Thanks. I think, you know, just to draw this back into a little bit into our like capacity question, and with the new capacity in downtown Manhattan at Trinity Place, you know, typically what we do in making an assessment as an office and with the superintendent's team and with the CEC is looking at sort of new construction in the area and anticipated zone size and growth. And I think that that's really going to throw a difficult wrinkle that we're going to try to do our best in terms of projecting the amount of students that are going to be in downtown Manhattan to fill this school. And what if we do choose to either create a zone or don't create a zone, how we want to proceed with the Trinity Place site in light of potentially changing enrollment trends. And that is a conversation that we typically, with the building opening in 2022, we'd begin that conversation around January of this year, just to look at, you know, is Battery Park City School really overcrowded and we want to make that zone smaller? Like, are the schools like 234 and Peck Slip and Spruce Street, do they need more students in their zone to attract more students so that school is a more sustainable size? And, you know, with a new school in that downtown sort of area, what would be the impact on the other schools if we either created a zone or made it a choice school open to the entire district? And so we, you know, are really looking forward to sort of beginning those conversations probably around January of this year with the superintendent's team and with the CEC, and like would look to you in terms of, you know, the best way to engage the communities in that conversation about sort of the use of that. Well, we know sort of how we want to use the site with 150, particularly because we're using the lease, but in terms of maximizing the space in the building, because it does have the capacity to serve 450 students, which is about a 3-section of grade school, and PS 150 is currently a 1-section of grade school.
Thanks, Eric. So that takes us through the data. We have a map at the end with all the school sites mentioned. So happy to open up to other questions the council might have about potential needs, questions with the data, district planning, whatever you'd like to discuss.
Jess, I want to ask something about, you know, what we had a joint multilingual meeting with CEC 1 and 3 this week on Monday, actually, trying to look at where to cite, since we have a new UPK, dual language French program on the East 76 pre-K site. And that will start next month or this, you know, in September. And those families, having secured French dual language UPK site, are now thinking about how to continue with dual language programming in a K-5 or K-8 setting. And the reason why we had the multi-district plan is because there is, with the exception of the Chinatown schools, you know, there has not been sort of the path that has worked in other districts, which is to cite dual language programs in schools that are under enrolled. How does your office work with cross-district planning? Like, what is the best way to work with you guys around the issue of planning over district boundaries?
Well, I mean, we are the Manhattan team. To answer that question, like, do an assessment of all of our districts in Manhattan from 6 to 1. But why is this a cross-district issue? Why can't we look to open up a dual language section in a District 2 school?
Oh, you'll be the most popular man in District 2 if you can figure out how to do that. So I'm all for that. But we have not yet, you know, found the right partner for that. Part of what there is, in truth, we've had the Francophone community come to our meetings now very regularly for a long time. There's the folks who are sort of most successful have been on the Upper East Side, but there were attempts to create a French dual language program in PS 340 that was more heavily focused from downtown parents when that was coming up, even around Bradley Park City, I think. And so the idea of looking at other districts was looking, because of in District 1, the number of under capacity seats and sort of the ease of transportation to get to a school like Asher Levy on 12th Street in terms of, you know, that's under enrolled. But I was also, that's why I also asked and was curious about the seat capacity, the projected need for additional elementary school seats on the Upper East Side. And I know there isn't a site identified as of yet, and that certainly doesn't help with a school that would start in 2021 for kindergarteners, but there could be a possibility, I think now, because we will, as Jennifer alluded to, probably have enough lower enrollment across different schools that maybe a school could co-locate for a year or two until something new would become a home. But that was why, Eric, that we were trying to look at other districts, because we haven't been with schools at capacity. It's hard to get a principal to say that they're going to set aside an entire section for a program when they don't have usually that space coming in.
Yeah. I mean, I think it also has to do with sort of the fit of the school too. And like, if there might be a school in the district that has a little bit of room, but is it a good fit from a principal and leadership and whatever standpoint? So, I think we can have conversations with the superintendent's team sort of to lean on sort of what may be a good fit, and if there is space in the district. And if not, we might have to think about sort of a long-term plan with our new capacity and rezoning, where we can leave some space for out-of-zone students for a dual language program, where we can create a zone size. For example, if the school can accommodate 3 sections, you create a zone that can fit 2, and then you have an out-of-zone section for a dual language program. And they have that in the Upper West Side at PS 84 and at PS 75.
Right, District 3 has been very successful in establishing, and one of the things that they've done is exactly what you're describing, is not, with the exception of, I think, PS 84, most of the dual language programs are one class within a cohort of non-dual language classes.
That's correct.
There may be two.
Mostly correct. I think that's correct at PS 84 and for the
Right.
most part, but there might be a couple like Spanish dual language double sections, but
Perhaps we can rope you guys into having a conversation about this in November after the numbers on this year's enrollment come out, so that that UPK program, which has 2 full sections, I think, we could talk with those families about where their options are for the following year.
Yeah, Maud, we're happy to continue this conversation once we
Great.
have some better data this fall. That sounds great. Just let us know.
Great.
Yes, hi, I had a question. I wanted to ask you about some of the ethnicity data.
Sure.
So it looks like, based on the ethnicity data on the first page that you put up, that our district, District 2, is the complete opposite. It's almost uncanny how the numbers are reversed with the city in general. Would you agree that whereas the city is generally would be a Hispanic and African-American majority school system, it's the complete opposite in District 2. So in other words, in District 2, it's a majority Caucasian, Asian population. But I wanted to ask you about the next page on, if you scroll down to the, where you see the schools.
Mhm.
Is there a correlation between the numbers or the ethnicity breakdown between the schools and the surrounding neighborhoods that they're located in? So for example, I know this is gonna sound a little silly, but is there a correlation between, let's say, schools in Chinatown, for example, having larger Asian populations and schools with surrounding, higher concentrations of African-American students having the largest number of African-American students? Is there a correlation between the surrounding neighborhoods and the school data that you have displayed, the race, ethnicity schools? Does that correlate?
for some of them, I would say it definitely does. Where you see it probably doesn't always correlate is with your choice schools and your screen schools. So in your zone schools that give a priority that have a high level of zone retention, you would definitely see that. But your schools like L. Baker that are on the Upper East Side might not exactly look like, I don't know what the zoned elementary school where L. Baker is, but that would be an interesting comparison.
E3 is down the block.
183, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, and the correlation, would you agree, is more prevalent in schools K through 6? Because those would not really be screen schools. Those are zone schools, correct?
Sure, the majority of District 2 elementary schools are zones, so that would make sense.
Okay.
Absolutely. If there are specific schools or neighborhoods that you would like some more information about, we can dive into some more specific data. Happy to do that. That would be
I was just curious because I saw that, for example, you had City Knoll, from what I recall, from one of the slides, was like one of the first schools that was listed. I'm presuming if you go to the City Knoll breakdown, could you scroll a little further down so I can see what those numbers, what they correlate to?
Sure,
Yes.
it's kind of hard to get. So the dark red color is students who identify as Hispanic or Latino. That pink is students who identify as Black.
So I'm assuming in the neighborhood north of Hell's Kitchen, Midtown, I guess Midtown West, there'll be a larger number of Hispanic population in that area, or?
I think this is trickier to generalize at the middle school level, especially a school that is choice and not zoned.
Okay, but definitely in the elementary school level. Okay.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yes. And I think City Knoll serves a greater population of Black and Hispanic students than, like, if we took the surrounding 3 zones of 111, 51, and 33, that they would still serve a sort of higher population of Black and Hispanic students than the surrounding area. There are more white families in that area than go to City Knoll.
I think also, while we're on the subject of City Knoll, just something quickly to raise for the council is, as you know, we temporarily cited City Knoll with PS 111 beginning this past school year for 3 school years. And so at the end of the 2021-22 school year, that co-location will kind of be due to kind of revisit. And so we have committed to identifying a long-term plan for City Knoll, figuring out what we should do and where the school could sit long-term. And I know Jennifer has had some good ideas about ways to engage the community this coming school year, to kind of hear from them about what they're thinking about their school. So something that we'll be diving into once the school year gets underway with the superintendent and her team.
And I apologize, I didn't want to sound too, I'm a lawyer by trade, so I apologize. But I guess what I was trying to get at, I guess, is the primary driver of the breakdown at these schools, especially on the kindergarten through elementary level, the neighborhoods that the schools are located in. That's all, just the ethnic breakdown, because we hear a lot about that in our district, you hear about segregation, but in fact, it's really based on the surrounding neighborhood because there's own schools.
Actually, I would challenge that. So I'm curious, I don't want to put you in the middle here, Eric and Jess, but we've gone through a lot of zonings. And if you look at the way the zone lines are drawn, they're clearly, they're not the exact shapes that you may imagine if you were cutting out contiguous areas. So I'm sure, not that we're going to do this, you could go back through that zone map and rezone all the schools to make them a lot more balanced. You wouldn't do away with some of identifying land, but I could guarantee you that if you look at the zone map as it's developed over time, there's clearly been decisions made over time to, I would say, keep certain groups, ethnicities together that could be, brought together.
Something that might be interesting for you all that we can put together is just a list of each school's demographics compared to the demographics of the zone. That way we can kind of see how this is playing out. So we're happy to put that together and share that back with the council in the coming weeks.
Thank you.
And actually, to feed off Eric's point, which I thought was a good one, have you ever thought about having subzones? Because as he said, schools, right next to each other have different diversity. Maybe having a parent choice subzone to increase diversity, breaking the district down into subzones and allowing parents to choose which school, elementary schools, they send their children to.
Ronaldo, you want to jump in and then I'll answer that question. I just saw that you had wanted to say something.
Thank you, Eric. Yeah, Jess was just saying that about putting together the next little data set about demographics and zoned students. For the schools that have gifted and talented programs, could you separate out in that data set the gifted and talented population of students that are enrolled, the demographics wise, and then the zoned programs, just so we can get a sense of if the diversifying or non-diversifying effect of those programs within the schools where they're cited? Thank you.
Yeah,
see what we can do. Thanks.
Thanks very much.
And Donalda, just to add to that, I think it's an important piece to have the data on. If that would include middle school programs as well. So, I guess referred to as SP and AP programs, beyond just the potentially elementary school G&T programs would be helpful as well.
Well, I kind of have a question on the SP AP programs. My daughter is going to a zone middle school next year. And from my understanding, 75% of the kids approximately at Wagner Middle School where she's going are in the SP program. And about roughly 25% are in the AP program. So I guess my question would be, is the SP really special? Or is it really that some students need extra help and we're trying to give it to them? This isn't really screening. It's really just about getting those kids extra education that they need.
I don't think that our team has the answer to that. Unfortunately, curious if Donald or Jennifer have any other thoughts.
So yes, you're correct. It's about 75% of the population, and what they all use the same curriculum, but the SP classes go richer and deeper in terms of the discussions going within the class.
Yeah, and now is that to benefit both sets of students, like the AP students would need extra attention and don't go as deep so they understand the material better, right? It's not really about screening, is it? It's about
I can't say that the AP students need extra attention. I could say that the SP students need extra attention in terms of being pushed more and going further into the work. We try to give every student, meet every student where they are, both for Wagner and any school, and you know, move them as best we can, regardless of whether or not they're at one end of the spectrum or the other.
And thank you.
But my understanding, Jennifer, I'm sorry, just to ask, my understanding though, Jennifer, is that the zoned program is the AP program, and then the SP program is does require a certain screen. Is that correct?
Well, because it's done through choice, you don't have to be zoned for either one. You're guaranteed a seat into the AP program if you're within the zone, but you might decide that you want to go to the AP program and you live on 20th Street. And
sure.
So apply to that and still get in.
Right, but the zoned portion is the AP portion.
Correct.
So Jennifer, would you say it's disingenuous to call the SP AP programs screening like other like schools like, I don't know, Clinton or Eastside Middle, things like that?
Well, you do have to go to a screen to get into the SP program. So it is a screen. So I don't think it's disingenuous.
But 75% of the kids make that screen in the school.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's a moving target as well. Like it's not year over year that 75% of the seats are screened and 25% of the seats are available to zoned. It's sort of, that can adjust year over year. The school has to accommodate all of its own students.
Right. It does, but historically, it's always somewhere around 75%.
Yeah.
Like, you know.
Right.
Is it the same at Baruch in terms of percentage?
Baruch, I think, is more 50-50, but I'm not 100% sure. I don't know what their last numbers were.
I looked at Baruch recently. It's a little more, it leans a little higher to the SP side.
It might be 60-40 there.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And I mean, just to underscore, this is a piece of information I know we've requested a few times, is the SP-AP breakdown, as well as the demographics in those programs. So I think, as Donalda suggested, getting program level demographics, you know, would be helpful just as we think through programming. So that would be appreciated.
I just have to be clear that my suggestion was specifically about elementary schools and gifted and talented programs cited in elementary schools, because the genesis of those gifted and talented programs that are cited in elementary schools had a diversification goal at the outset. And I would like to see to what extent that goal is achieved or not. That was my original suggestion. I think, Eric, your request is around the demographics of AP and SP programs. And we do have that disproportionality data available, and the NYCIP team has been analyzing it.
Yeah, I'm just asking it to be shared. Yeah.
I want to add one other thing to the AP SP thing. It's a fluid system. So you could come in through AP, but if you demonstrate that you're capable of doing harder work, then you could move into the SP, and vice versa. You could come into the SP program if you demonstrate that you're not able to carry on and do the work as required. You can wind up in the AP program. So,
but it would also be interesting to get the MAT, because that's also one, if you're trying to look at data at MAT, that because it does have an elementary school portion, it's very difficult to look at data for MAT. And I don't know, Donalda, if that falls within your, because that's not really specifically a G&T, but because as it moves into middle school, it's very difficult to parse the data.
Yes, I agree. I completely agree with you, Emily. That is true. The disaggregation of our K-8 data is a ongoing piece of work, because, for example, with 126, that's a great example of a completely zoned elementary school and a screened middle school program. Whereas the complete opposite, it would be a school like Spruce Street that has a completely zoned elementary and a completely unscreened middle school, where about a class or two out of the 3 classes on the grade in middle school choose to stay or not, depending on various, patterns of parents' employment or children, the middle school choice process for kids. They're very different. And so a lot of our overall kind of equity analysis of the district around opportunity and access notices the percentage ranges of certain populations of kids within specific schools. And we notice that we have very large ranges, demographically speaking, across schools.
Jennifer, I have another question. You're speaking to the fluidity between the SP program and the AP program. When I was a child, we had, special education programs and resource rooms, and you can move up and down according to the education needs that you need. Would you say that more resembles that system than, say, a screen school, or not, just because of the fluidity?
No, I think they're very different things. Resource room and anything has to do with either intervention or an IEP has nothing to do with 2 different programs.
Okay, thank you.
Thought of something separate. When I went to school, we had an SP program. It was a 2-year program. You did junior high in 2 years as opposed to 3. So SP programs have been around a long time, as I have.
So the question remains, and I think it's sort of been avoided, which is we want the demographic and numeric breakdown for 6th grade SP AP at those schools. And for some reason, it continues to get declined.
So I'll say, Jess and Eric, we'll, as a council, we can discuss if we have specific data requests and put them into you. I'm just going to note that we're at 90 minutes of your lovely company. And I'm going to make sure that if anybody else wants to get in any last questions that have not been asked, this would be a good time to do it. I'd like to open it up to council members who haven't been heard from. And then if you guys have any final things that you'd like to share, that would be great too.
Yes,
so
I'd like to ask a question for Eric and Jess.
Okay.
Do you have bus data for these schools like PS33? A lot of their students come by bus, and I'd like to see if there's a difference pre-COVID and post-COVID.
Busing data.
So the percentage of students who are attending the school who take a bus to school, is that right?
Right. And then they're going to be impacted just because of what's going on. So I'd like to find out how that's going to be impacted and how many students are coming from out of the community that you're then checking the demographics for locally.
Yeah, off the top of my head, and I don't have it exactly in front of me, but I think a decent amount of students come from outside the 33 zone because they go into that 2 sections of gifted and talented.
Right.
33. So it would be interesting to look at if students in gifted and talented programs choose to stay closer to their homes to avoid traveling, but I don't know if we'll be able to really dive into that trend.
Well, you're going to like at PS116, they have a number of buses, bringing in students to their school as well. So, this whole mix is all going to be in flux this year.
Yeah.
So,
Anecdotally, as of right now, and I don't know what will happen tomorrow, every day is another day, families are choosing to stay at their gifted and talented. They haven't notified the schools that they want to leave.
I agree that this is something that would be interesting to look at once we have a little bit more data. Absolutely.
Yes, I have a question here. Hello?
Yep.
Yeah, Ed, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Ed, we can hear you.
Are there zones for elementary schools that change for middle school? And how is that determined? Why do they change?
Zones for elementary school that change from middle school.
For example, if a kid is zoned for an elementary school in D2 or D1, does it change for middle school?
Yes.
And how is that determined? Why is that determined?
I completely, like the example I'm thinking of is the like Stuytown students in the southern part of the district zoned to District 1 for elementary school that are not technically zoned to District 1 for middle school. They have a priority there, but are zoned to Baruch for middle school. So there's a pocket, I think it's like 16th, 17th Street, and it like zigzags around Stuyvesant Oval in terms of like certain buildings getting into our D1 elementary schools, but then are zoned to Baruch for middle school. I know that also exists in a portion of Chinatown as well. I know that for the most part, like most elementary, like I don't have our middle school zone map, but most middle school, like there are 4 zoned middle schools in District 2, Baruch, Wagner, 131, and Roosevelt Island. And so those zones are much larger and encompass a bunch of different smaller elementary school zones.
And 75 Morton as well.
Okay,
And 75 Morton. How could I forget 75 Morton?
Never.
So 5. And for the most part, those elementary school zones like neatly fit into those schools. But there is that like one example in District 1 with the Stuytown area, and there's another example in the Chinatown area. And I have no idea. I give you a long answer, and I have no idea how that happened.
No one seems to know.
If we're going to be historical, Eric, it wasn't at some point, weren't parts of Brooklyn part of District 2?
No.
Never?
I'm going to defer to Jennifer.
Roosevelt Island, but not Brooklyn.
Okay. All right, on that little bit of misinformed historical data.
I know that like there have been people in that area of Stuytown have like asked and requested to be zoned to District 2 at different parts of time as well. And that is something that our office looks at and can look at over time, but it might be, I think in the past it's been really difficult to achieve because of how overcrowded 40 has been, and bringing more people into the 40 zone would it's kind of counterintuitive, like that would create more problems. But over time, if we're seeing demographic shifts in terms of the amount of students that are living in the city, this is something that we could consider in terms of having students like not having overlap. But we also do have to consider sort of the impact on District 1 and that data as well. And that district has lost a lot of students, is under enrolled, and actually needs more kids. So.
Hey, I have one more question. We started talking about the decreasing enrollment in Chinatown schools. And I know that there was efforts made to stabilize enrollment at some of those schools over the past year. Could you just share what that effort was? I'm just not aware of what was done to stabilize enrollment.
Donalda, can we lean on you for that answer?
I think she may have left us for a moment. She just had.
We're supposed to start this year, and really intensely. They changed the enrollment priorities. I don't have them in front of me, so that they would not take kids from each other, but they could take children from outside of their zone and outside of Chinatown in District 2.
So is it outside of? So okay, I thought that we had said that it had already stabilized this year due to interventions, but it sounds like that's not the case. That the enrollment priorities were only going to change for next year?
Some started it ahead of time. It was intended for next year.
Right. And what are the change in enrollment priorities?
That's what I just said. I don't remember the exact change in priorities. I don't have it in front of me. But it was to stop taking children from each other. That was the point of it. And they could take more kids from outside of the Chinatown area.
It was also to make sure that to give principals more lead time in planning, because some of the schools were historically facing a situation where they would go up or down an entire class sometimes in August. So the hiring of teachers became difficult, and that kind of planning became difficult. I know those were some of the considerations that went into those changes to try to provide the relief to principals in terms of like over the summer planning, teacher hiring, teacher retention, and that kind of thing.
I guess I'm still just not clear. I want to go on this point because it feels like we're moving on without answering it. I don't understand how that would stabilize enrollment, because it would still be the same total enrollment across those schools.
What I was going to say is when we get Donalda back, it would be a good question to address with her. I think she went off to see her child. Because she made a very, very happy face right before she went off. So go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think it's like, it was largely just to dissuade families from, like, there's a lot of motion happening down there and late in the cycle. And I think it was supposed to dissuade that amount of late motion of students. We will see if it works or not.
Right. And I think the intention was to stabilize each school's individual enrollment, less so than the enrollment of Chinatown overall.
Great. No, that's a good clarification.
I'm sorry. What's that, Eric?
No, I said that's a helpful clarification. That's to stabilize each school rather than the overall population.
Hopefully I have that right, Donalda.
Oh, that's absolutely accurate. And, you know, anecdotally, we know from the principals who participated in that brainstorming and needs analysis around what could we do immediately. And we're really generous and flexible with one another about trying something. That last summer was the first summer in a very long time that they could remember that they weren't monitoring their kindergarten enrollment or their enrollment in general every day. And they were able to, you know, have the benefit of what a typical school leader would enjoy in the summer, because they weren't so tense about, you know, one or more classes either adding or losing, and the accessing of teachers or the hiring of teachers. And they could really know that the community that they are zoned to receive is the community that they will accept and proceed forward with in a continuous way. Furthermore, part of that was phase one of the stabilization process, but the other piece was about figuring out ways to offer families who were priced out of Chinatown and needed to move to outer boroughs an access point into those schools, because we know that grandparents and extended family are so essential for childcare before and after school for working families. And so the reordering of the admissions priorities gave an opening for families that were displaced from the area to be able to still send their children to school there and still maintain membership in the community, even if they weren't living in the neighborhood at the time. And so that's something that we're still monitoring to see if there's going to be a benefit, but the phase one part was successful. And I think that the school leaders are very grateful for this council's support and for district planning support in helping us figure it out, as well as the Office of Enrollment, who helped us reorder the admissions priorities in the way that they did. It was all a very collaborative effort that has had a strong positive impact on the stability of the communities.
Great. Thanks for that update. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, final call on questions for district planning. Okay, Caitlin, Jess, and Eric, thank you very, very much. There are a few points that we would like to get some follow-up data from you. Oh, there we go, our screen is changing. And if whatever you have already that you've noted and can get to us, and if we have anything additional follow-up after receiving that from you, we can be back in touch. I think that's probably the best way to go to move forward.
That sounds great. We will share what we can as soon as we can. And thank you so much for having us and for your time and engagement tonight.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, guys, I am gonna just go slightly out of order on our agenda now, and I'm gonna move to agenda item number 4, which is the approval of the minutes. We have a lot of minutes to approve. Have all the council members, we had minutes from Vincent, I believe it was from February. February was the last non-Zoom meeting that we held, and we sent to you a few weeks ago the February through June. I believe, Vincent, we went up to June 30th, correct? Oh, Vincent, you're muted. Can we unmute you?
Yes, that's right. It was February through June 29th, I think, is the last.
Oh yes, June 29th. We had a June 11th and June 29th meeting. So we sent all several weeks ago the minutes from February to June 29th. And now, Jennifer, please tell me that we can approve the whole slate of minutes together. Please.
Okay, I'll tell you okay, but just state every date and ask if there's any additions or deletions to any dates, and then do it in one motion.
Okay. Vincent, can you read off the date and then ask if there are additions?
It's going to be a little tough. I'll give it a shot. I don't have that list in front of me, but let's see. I know that we proposed minutes for June 11th, June 29th. There was a meeting on May. Actually, I'm going to take a minute to try to find
You know what? Why don't you find the list of the dates so we can read them, and we'll come back to that.
Website. Just read off the website.
Yeah, maybe it is, but maybe it changed. Yvette, if you're on the call with us and can walk Vincent through that, that would be great. So then we'll back up to, and I'm just going to remind our folks who are with us, because we have 43 folks with us, that this is not a calendar meeting and there are no public speaking sessions. So if you're waiting to have public speaking opportunities, you will have to wait till August 11th, because that is when we have our next calendar meeting, and we'd be very, very happy to see you at that calendar meeting. So then I'm also going to add that we did have, as far as dates are concerned, there's two things I'd like to, there's actually three things we need to add to the agenda. Ben Morden, I believe you needed to add to the agenda while Vincent is doing the gathering up the dates of our minutes, the introduction of a budget. Has everyone received from Ben the introduction of the budget, because we need to vote on the budget?
Yes, I got it.
Okay.
I got it. I have to say I did not have a time to look at it intensely, but it only came in a little while.
Ben, do you want to just do a very quick walkthrough of what the budget is?
Right. Apparently we have the same amount of money from last year, budgeted again, 25,000. A few items I did not include in this budget proposal, being that we're remote and using Zoom. So like babysitting and refreshments, and so that's not included in the budget. And also what's the biggest part of typically the CEC budgets throughout the city is transportation reimbursements. Again, I reduced the potential there because CEC members can get reimbursed up to $125 per month, and a CEC president up to $200 per month, according to DOE rules. I have to thank Michelle sending me all the additional information. I didn't know about this till the other day. So equipment, I budgeted for 3,200. The 3,200 is, I'm thinking that maybe we'll need for, I don't know if this year, but eventually I think we will need for iPads or a laptop to do, I think, continue some kind of Zoom meeting with a physical meeting if physical meetings transpire. For membership, it's if I'm going to do this by line item, I'm allotting $100 per member, so it comes out to $1,100. And then you get a whole host of, if you're looking at these line items on the budget that I proposed for domain registration, website hosting, web app, constant contact, the mailbox, and the Zooms. Aside from Zooms, those other parts have been prepaid. So it'd be nice to, except for like one of them, there's just a few months lapse. It would be good to prepay for next year because who knows if the budget's going to be allocated again at 25,000. Now, I left a little money for operations. I did not include business cards because we haven't had any change in people, and I don't know how many business cards are being used. And then there are a few other items. So it works out to about 25,000. There's an adjustment in March, so we can fine tune it then. And it has to be all placed and paid out by June. Aside from this 25,000 in budgets, we do have some existing reimbursements. Maud paid for Zoom and her NYC expenses, so we have to reimburse her for that. We have to actually vote upon that. And then there's Eric Goldberg had some transportation. I guess he was using taxis to get back and forth to these meetings since they were from last year. By rule, we have to decide whether to reimburse him or not for that. And there's the current year's reimbursements. Reimbursements can't be done until there's a budget approved, and that's going forward as well.
Okay, so it sounds like Ben. Oh, sorry, Ben. I didn't mean to cut you off. It sounds like we have 3 things to vote on. One would be, the first thing would be the adoption of this budget, and the second 2 things would be individual reimbursement for members that are rolled over from last year.
Exactly. That's
because normally we don't vote on these sort of reimbursements.
Yeah.
Can I just ask a quick question, Maud, before we go to vote? I'm sorry, Ben, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead, Emily.
I just was wondering if, if all of a sudden, I don't know, there's some miracle cure for this thing and we start to go back in March and all of a sudden people do need babysitting or pizza or things like that. Is there the opportunity to pivot? I know sometimes these things like get locked in. You mentioned March as a potential place to change things. I just didn't know.
As far as I understand, you can submit your receipts and have them reimbursed several months later. So we can, if it turns out that, let's root for the miracle cure and lots of taxi rides that will be happening in March. And if that happens, I think that we are able to move money around in the budget to reimburse. And Ben, tell me if I'm wrong, but that's
that's correct. But we're also autonomous, so we can decide to stay Zoom till June. So we can live by the budget, or we can be flexible and change it. It's very hard to forecast without knowing.
Len, you go first.
I just want to say something. I realize we're not exactly handing out business cards, but it's my understanding we're going to be doing committee assignments, and I believe that those appear, our current committees appear on our business cards. So if it's chair, for example, community engagement. So I mean, I don't anticipate handing out business cards in this environment, but we have 0 budget for it. You never know, it might come up. So I don't know if we should allocate something to that, or we could do it at a later point in time.
We can use a P card. We can use a P card for that. I have allotted 5,000 to that. So in case, that happens.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question, Ben. Yeah. When we had, what was it, $18,000 to reallocate, somewhere around that ballpark?
Yeah. Temporary housing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, first of all, did it actually go there? I haven't heard anything.
Question, because I'd like to find that out too, because there's some issue, from what I understand, on where money can be allocated that I just read upon the other day. So I think I have to speak with the grant officer and find out, because they have to provide us where that money went. And there's some guidelines, like it can go to education. That's why I think it went to books.
Yes. Yes, I remember being on a call with Corey Johnson's office where we had asked for accounting, and they did say that all of the money, because it had to be dispersed by June, and with Iris Gersten, who's the head of students in temporary housing, and it was determined they found culturally responsive books for each age group that then they allocated based on the number of students per shelter across the city. So they used the amount of money they had from all of the different CECs, looked at books for different groups, because it did have to be education related.
So when we allocated those funds, we were under the impression that it would be supplies. We talked about backpacks, things like that. So that's not exactly where it went, right? It went to books, which are typically supplied by the Department of Education.
To the best of my knowledge, it went to books.
Okay.
But I don't know who or how those decisions got made. All I know is that the money was spent, and it was spent on books.
When we voted on it, it was to, for supplies, I don't know what the word was in general, but materials that could be used for students in temporary housing. And multiple districts did the same thing. It was an initiative that Shino Tanakawa worked on because it's atypical of what we're normally allowed to do with dollars from the CEC budget. And because there were many different exceptions being made due to COVID, that exception had been made. One of the things that Shino had asked for, and that I thought made a lot of sense, is that we got a reporting back from the DOE about where the money was spent, and we haven't gotten that yet, but we can certainly follow up with that. But ultimately it was used to purchase books for students in temporary housing.
Right. So we could have just taken the money and bought the supplies we wanted and actually brought the supplies to the students in temporary housing, but we didn't do that, right?
No, I don't know if we could actually do that. There's some guidelines. It has to be education. We have to provide something that would be considered, education supplies or.
What actually, Tom, that had been done the year prior. We had used excess funds out of our budget to purchase backpacks and school supplies and brings to student and temporary housing. And Shino also did a lot of work around that. And she thought that that was not actually ideal, and what she was trying to do is centralize some of that through the DOE. And so I'm appreciative of those efforts, because trying to figure out the best way to make that excess money work in a direct and impactful way, I think is a really good thing. I'd like to hear back more information about what was, we got the information from Deputy Chancellor Adrian Austin about which books were selected. There was actually a book list that we all got to review. It came by email. And so, I would certainly wait for our council member who spearheaded this to, I thank Ushma for her knowledge and that she just shared with us, but also Shino had worked on the previous term before you were here, Tom. Shino had worked on using the excess money we had, one of our many unanimous votes to use excess money to buy backpacks and school supplies. So that effort, the direct delivery, Tom, had been tried, and because it was found to be wanting on a couple of different levels this year, we were trying to coordinate across the city with other CECs to bulk purchase and maybe find a more streamlined and more successful delivery.
Okay, so when I was treasurer and introduced an actual budget, which was kind of taken and then reallocated to that, I suggested having a polling company do polls on education issues.
I'm aware of that, Tom. You've mentioned it many times.
I want to bring this up because I was told that in the new budget by everybody on this council that we would consider it for the new budget. And it doesn't appear that we're doing so. I would like to know what the parents in our district actually think about issues.
Hey, Tom, let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
One of the pieces of feedback that you got on that poll, that proposal to have a poll, is the fact that District 2, geographically, a huge number, a very significant percentage of students who live in District 2 don't attend public school. So in order to poll District 2 public school students, you need a data set of District 2 public school students. You don't have that. I don't have that. Our CEC doesn't have it. And the DOE made very clear when you communicated with them that they were not going to provide that data set to you. CECs don't get the emails and the phone numbers of students and families who live in our district. That was one of the unanswered concerns about how to effectuate. I agree with you, Tom, that it's great to poll parents and to get direct feedback from parents. But in order to hire a polling company to do it, you have to have a universe of people that you're reaching out to. And it seemed to me quite unclear how we were going to establish that universe.
Well, I mean, we said we were going to try, and apparently we're not. Right? They're on record, right? So we can go back and listen to them.
Ben, I think it's time to vote on your proposed budget, which you shared by email with everybody earlier today. And if anyone has any other questions before that, I am going to move to adopt the budget as submitted by Ben Morden. Can anyone second that motion? Len Silverman seconds that motion.
I second.
Vincent, would you do a roll call on the adoption of the budget?
Yes. So on adoption of the budget as submitted by Ben Morden, as proposed by Ben Morden, Robin is not here. Eric Goldberg.
Yes.
Emily Hallstrom.
Yes.
I will vote yes. Edward Irizarry.
Yes.
Maud Marin.
Yes.
Ben Morden.
Yes.
Ushma Neal.
Yes.
Len Silverman.
Yes.
Shino's not here. Tom Rockledge.
While I appreciate your hard work, Ben, and I respect you as a person, I'm going to have to vote no.
Okay. So the budget.
The budget passes with 7 yeses.
Right. I think it's 8 actually. It's going to be 8 and 1 no.
8.
Passes with
I
8
don't know how I
yeses,
missed one.
1 no,
Okay.
and 2 votes missing.
Okay. 8.
Right.
Now I'm going to move, I'll move to reimburse Eric's expenses from last year. Can I get a second for that?
I'll
motion?
second.
Len Silverman seconds it. Vincent, will you do the roll call vote?
Sure. On the proposal to reimburse Eric for his.
Wait, there's 1 second. I have to actually be provided receipts. Depending.
Just Ben.
So I'm
Ben.
assuming. Yeah.
Yeah. I submitted everything last year.
Yeah.
I think it didn't get put through because of the budget issues. I'm fine to defer it. Honestly, I think it's like $60, but I submitted all the receipts and the paperwork in June. And I think we ran out of money is why it didn't go through.
Well, the money goes back to the DOE and then DOE guidelines say we have to vote again with the new budget. And then I have to look at the receipts and sign
Ben,
off.
I was just saying you should have the receipts.
Yeah, ask Yvette, Ben, because Eric submitted the receipts and I submitted my receipts, so Yvette has all of those receipts.
It looks like she's raised her hand, by the way.
Oh, Yvette, I thought I made Yvette a co-host. Hold on. Yvette, hold on. I'm coming. Yvette, I'm asking you to unmute yourself. Yvette, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I do have all the receipts. I will forward them to Ben.
Okay.
And the new budget, I didn't get a copy.
I will email out to you. Well, it's passed right now, so.
Okay, and also last thing, Vincent, when we get to the minutes, I have all the dates.
Oh, great.
Because I was muted, so I couldn't say it.
Oh, see?
Okay, well, I have all the dates too, I think. So
Okay, good. So we
get
have
back to me,
backup. We'll get it very accurately voted on those minutes. Wonderful.
Yvette, it's great to hear your voice. I miss seeing you.
Oh, I know.
Indeed.
Stay strong.
So just to be clear, normally we don't vote on expenses. What Ben was preparing the budget, and he told me that with regard to expenses that were being rolled over, it required a roll call vote. So we're trying to do everything properly, and I really appreciate that. So Vincent, can you give us a roll call vote on reimbursing Eric's expenses?
Can I ask a point of order question to
Sure.
Jennifer? Is it possible to vote for a partial reimbursement? Like I take the subway to all these meetings, like most people, and the subway costs $2.75.
You know what? Don't worry about it. You
Okay.
guys don't need to reimburse me. It's fine. Like I said, sorry, Maud. I need to step. As I said, I need to step away for a minute. Can we vote
I'd
on
vote
your
for
reimbursement
$5.50.
just so I could vote for your reimbursement, and then I'm just going to step away for a sec.
Thank
The
you, Eric.
motion, you have to go with what the motion on the table is.
I was just going to say that I made the motion and I want the vote. So the motion to fully reimburse Eric Goldberg for his previously submitted expenses. Vincent, please call the roll call.
Sure. Robin is not here. Eric Goldberg.
Yes.
Emily Hallstrom.
Yes.
I vote yes. Edward Irizarry,
Yes.
Maud Marin,
Yes.
Ben Morden,
Yes.
Ushma Neal,
Yes.
Len Silverman,
Yes.
Shino is not here, Tom Rockledge.
No, take the subway.
Okay. Okay, so it passes again, as with the prior vote, 8-1, two members not present. Okay, so.
The only outstanding item on the budget is reimbursing me for Zoom expenses that
I move
occurred
to
last year.
reimburse Maud for the Zoom expenses.
I second.
And Len seconds it. Thank you for that. Vincent, will you please call a roll call vote on that?
Okay, a vote to reimburse Maud for Zoom expenses incurred last year. Robin's not here, Eric Goldberg.
Yes.
Emily Hallstrom.
Yes.
I will vote yes as well. Edward Irizarry.
Yes.
Maud
Yes.
Marin.
Yes.
Benjamin Morden.
Yes.
Ushma Neal.
Yes.
Len Silverman.
Yes.
Shino Tanakawa is not present. Tom Rockledge.
Yes.
Okay, so that passes 9-0 with 2 members not present.
Okay, that covers all of our, and Eric, yes, I heard you that you had to
Yes,
step away
okay,
and you'll try to come back.
Okay.
We will now, so that covers all of our budget matters. Ben, is there anything else in the budget we need to cover?
No.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
I would like to move on to another order of new business, which is committee assignments.
Wait, can we just get the minutes out of the way? Or
Oh
do we
God,
want
yes.
to wait for Eric to come back?
Please make a motion on the minutes, Ushma.
I don't have the dates. I can't.
All right, Vincent, make a motion to
Okay,
pass our minutes.
I make a motion to pass the minutes from prior meetings, including the minutes from February 13th.
Does anyone have any additions or deletions for February 13th? No. Next minutes, Vincent?
Next minutes from March 26th, Zoom meeting.
Does anyone have additions or deletions? No.
Next meeting is April 7.
Does anyone have additions or deletions? Sorry, Vincent.
Okay. Next meeting is April 14.
Additions or deletions?
April 27.
Additions or deletions? No. Raise your hand if you do. Moving on.
May 14. No. May 22nd. No. June 11. June 29.
Additions or deletions on any of those dates? No, no, and no. And we haven't done our July minutes yet, right?
No,
So,
they will be ready.
forthcoming.
I second that motion.
Motion is seconded by Ushma. Let's have a roll call vote on the motions on the minutes, Vincent.
Okay, roll call vote on adopting all the minutes that were just announced. Robin's not here. Eric, I think, stepped out.
Not here.
Emily Hallstrom.
Yes.
I vote yes. Edward Irizarry.
Yes.
Maud Marin.
Yes.
Benjamin Morden.
Yes.
Ushma Neal.
Yes.
Len Silverman.
Yes.
Shino Tanakawa is not present. Tom Rockledge.
Yes.
Okay, so that passes unanimously.
The motions are now, will be posted by Yvette, and Yvette's very happy about that. We're getting applause from Yvette that we finally got our motions passed.
Okay, so it's 8-0.
Yes. Wonderful. That's done. That feels, now we're quite up to date. Let's discuss committee assignments. Well, let's discuss one thing further under new business, which is our meeting dates. Our meeting dates we voted on as per our bylaw requirements on the last date. I had flagged April 13th, which on the calendar I was looking at said Ramadan, and I wanted to make sure that we picked a date that wasn't potentially a religious observance conflict for April. So we could look at changing that date. And if there are any other dates, I had reached out, I had told council members if there were specific issues with other dates that we would one last time change it on this meeting, but then we would have our, our full slate of meetings posted on our website for the full year. I'd also like to add that review of minutes. We had 4 meetings in April, 3 meetings in April. That's a whole lot of meetings. I think that I have unanimous agreement on this council that we can go back to having our working business meeting and calendar meeting on the same day. And I wanted to see from folks what would work better. I am going to suggest, but I'm open to hearing what other folks want to do, that we move our working business meeting to before the calendar meeting, because I think if we know we have a start time on the calendar meeting, we can be concise in getting out anything that we want to do. We could either start that at 6 o'clock and then start our calendar meeting at 6:30, or bump it back. I know other councils start things at 5 o'clock. That seems a little early to me, but I'm open to suggestions. My suggestion, and it's just a suggestion, is to do our working business meeting at 6 o'clock and do our calendar meeting at 6:30. If for some reason we anticipated needing a whole lot more time, we could certainly schedule additional time, but it would force us all to be nice and disciplined about coming prepared to our working business meeting. Does anyone strongly object to that plan? That would mean that on August 11th, we would have a working business meeting at 6 p.m. and a calendar meeting at 6:30.
Do we think we're going to be able to get through all of our business meeting in half an hour? I feel like that's a bit ambitious. I mean, already tonight we're over 2 hours.
The truth is, for the first term that I served on this council, well, this is because we had district planning come to a working business meeting. Normally, Ushma, we have district planning come to our calendar meetings for this presentation, but they wanted to try something different this year and come to a working business meeting to have something more conversational. So in the spring, if we were going to have them come to a working business meeting, I think we would maybe bifurcate it and separate it. In the first term I served in this council, our working business meetings were sometimes 3 minutes at the end of the calendar meeting because we had discussed everything in a calendar meeting and we were just sort of abiding by the requirements to have them, but our bigger discussions around the issues were actually happening in the calendar meeting. Emily, is that your recollection? Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, listen, I think that, meeting twice a month is definitely tough on everybody. And, but yes, we would go quickly. Part of the reason we would go quickly is because it would be 10 o'clock, 9:57.
Right. And we'd be getting kicked out of whatever school we were in because we had usually overstayed our welcome. So can we give it a try for August? Yeah. Let's give it a try.
Yes,
having the
definitely.
working business meeting start at 6 o'clock and the calendar meeting start at 6:30. Mm-hmm. All right.
Can somebody send around the list of dates for the rest of the year? I don't think I haven't.
I have it.
Marked my calendar.
I will send it to you, but I have it's August 11th, September 8th, October 13th, November 9th, December 14th, January 12th, February 9th, March 9th, April 13th, May 11th, and June 8th.
And someone will post those on the website.
Yeah, I'll ask you, Yvette, will you please post those on the website? Okay, so 6 p.m. working business meeting for August 11th, and then 6:30 p.m. Calendar meeting. So the next new order of business is committee assignments. And I had 2 suggestions for this. Well, actually, I'll say, Ben Morden, you had reached out to propose a new committee.
Yes. My proposal is to have a remote learning committee in order to see how parents, students, and teachers getting their feedback, seeing what is working, what's not, what apps are being used, what percentages of remote learning is live instruction. So we can have that and provide information and see where there's some best case scenarios or schools, and then see which schools are not. So I want to switch from screen to be more active in this area. our parents, they're our customers, we represent them. We have to coordinate with them. And I think this is really important. We get this right this year, or New York is going to face even greater issues going forward. I contacted Maud a few weeks ago saying this is what I would like to pursue, and hoping we can go forward.
So if I'm recalling our bylaws correctly, we need to vote on the creation of a committee, and then I appoint the committee chairperson, if I'm remembering the bylaws correctly. And so I'm going to move to create and establish a remote learning committee.
A second.
Len seconds it. Vincent, will you call the roll call? Unless, sorry, does anyone have any questions, ideas, thoughts, comments? If not, we'll call the roll call vote. Vincent,
we need a roll call, or can it be unanimous consent for these?
I think it's a roll call.
You only need to do a roll call for a resolution.
Oh,
Right.
there you
so
go. Wonderful.
Unanimous consent. Let's go.
Okay.
So I support the notion. If everyone else does, we'll establish a remote learning committee. If anyone has any objections, speak now. All right, and so Ben Morden, I'm going to appoint you to be the chair of the remote learning committee. My other suggestion is that I thought that we should reduce the number of committees we have, and I thought that we should reduce both the community engagement committee and the screening committee. And my reasoning is this: our community engagement is most successful when we have the substantive committees that we have. For instance, Emily Hellstrom has done a really fantastic job with the Students with Disabilities Committee, and it engages a very specific and active community. So I think it makes, for me, it just seems, and this is something that came up at the beginning of the term when we created that committee, is that the way to engage parents is always to hold forums and to hold events that parents are interested, that they want to hear about and they want to learn about. So, you know, we did that with the diversity committee and the gifted and talented panel that we had, the students with disabilities. So I just think that that's the way to engage our community, is by talking about the things that, you know, that fellow parents want to hear about. So instead of having that as a separate committee, that we would have the committees that people are interested in. With regard to the screening committee, now that we're moving forward into phase 3 of the NYCIP grant, it seemed to me, and we had a very substantive discussion of the work that's been done on the NYCIP grant on Tuesday. It just seemed to me that we don't want to have parents, I think there can be too many things where parents don't know where to go to have their voice heard. So it seems to me, and we're going to have, I think there's a date for our next NYCIP meeting, which we're going to try to have on September 22nd or 23rd. And the reason why we're trying to plan it to really as far in advance as possible is because I'd really like to get the transportation and interpretation request in as far as possible for that event, because one of the things that was very frustrating about NYCIP on Tuesday is that we tried. I give an enormous credit to the administrative team of District 2, because they figured out how to use the Zoom feature for translation, where people could dial into specific Zoom and we had volunteers, parent coordinators, and volunteer DOE staff doing the translation, the live translation, which is incredibly difficult. Because we weren't able to get translation and interpretation. So I'm enormously grateful to, and feel bad now that I'm thinking about it, that we didn't properly thank the folks who did the volunteering when we were live. Thank them afterwards, but not live, for the work that they did. So I'd like to, so the reason that I was thinking about reducing those committees is because I think we want to have sort of one place where families can go to get that information. So those were my suggestions, certainly open to hear other things. And then we would maintain the Students with Disabilities Committee, maintain the Diversity Committee, maintain the Zoning Committee, which we're required to do, and with some embarrassment say we have to maintain our Bylaws Committee, which we need to work on and fix our bylaws, because our bylaws are really, our bylaws are pre-Zoom, and really anticipate. There's much language. There's some language that we have to change because it was found to be invalid around the issue of absences and removing council members for absences, but also we need to update our bylaws to acknowledge we live in the Zoom era, and how we distribute things is not physical paper distribution, and those sorts of things are really quite out of date in our bylaws. So they need to be updated. That's my suggestion on committee formation going forward. So if anyone wants to
I do.
say anything,
Yeah, I do. Thank you. I think we should keep the screening committee. The NYC program is a pilot program, and screening happens to be a very important issue to this community. I would recommend chairing it. I passed a resolution, I introduced and got a unanimous pass on the screening resolution that I brought forth last meeting. I also put forth 2 more, which I've received a lot of feedback on how to improve screens in our district. I would hold monthly meetings open to the public to get their opinion. I think screening is very important. I also think that we should add a students in temporary housing committee. I've been working with another parent from Salk, her name is Jocelyn, putting together lists of all the supplies that students in each individual shelter need. I've received a $20,000 commitment from a single individual and hope to see more. I'd like the community to be involved with the students in temporary housing, and I will also hold monthly meetings to solicit input and spread the word to get these students the supplies they need. Those are the additions that I request.
Second, the notion of the Students in Temporary Housing Committee, and Jocelyn has been a terrific partner, and I would also like to note that Shino and I started that whole project and did an enormous amount of work at the beginning, and have now since moved forward a lot with the pandemic EBT, and have spent a significant amount of time with a number of city council offices, as well as Grow NYC and others, towards trying to work on food insecurity in terms of our students in temporary housing. I do like that idea very much.
Yeah, and yeah, Jocelyn and I have continued what you started, and we're just trying to get the students the supplies that they need, because we don't think they're getting them.
I guess I have one question, Ushma and Tom, which is,
sure.
I think the work, as I have said again and again, is fantastic, and
but do we need a committee?
My question around the committee is that I think that it's a committee about a certain group of people, and if those group of people won't be the voices that are heard again month after month, that it worries me.
Why does it matter? You don't have to do any work. I want to bring the community into this to help get the students the supplies they need. What does it matter?
I heard you, and I'm going to finish my thought. I have some concerns about having a bunch of non-homeless folks having a meeting every month to talk about what communities who are living in temporary housing need or want, or discussing people in absentia. I just have some concerns about, I support fully the work that Shino and Ushma started, that Jocelyn and Tom have done, and I have supported it by voting to increase the amount of money we sent towards the student in temporary housing allotment that Shino had proposed. I think it's a wonderful thing we did. What my concern is that when you have a committee, what Emily has done so successfully is create a committee where parents who are actually trying to navigate a system with their kids who are undiagnosed or diagnosed are coming and being heard and finding a community in which they can talk to one another. And I don't know that we need to create spaces where people who aren't there are being talked about.
What makes you, oh, sorry, are you finished? What makes you assume that the parents of students in temporary housing don't want to join these meetings, like the parents of students with disabilities, and maybe give us feedback on what they need?
Just from a past experience of who comes to our meetings.
Correct. But now with Zoom, they have iPads. They should have had laptops, but they have iPads that they can join these meetings, right?
Mm-hmm. It was just my thought and my idea. I'm open to other people thinking differently about it.
Can I ask, is now the only time we can establish committees? Or is there a potential for Tom and I and other interested parties to try and convene a few meetings and see whether or not we do get buy-in from the community, because I recognize that, you know, sitting here in my apartment in Manhattan with food security and income, that I cannot speak to the needs of that community. I can try to help, but I do not speak for them. So whether or not we could manage to convene a community of people, I think is an important test for us to make sure that we are engaging with the right groups of people. So if we are able to convene a community that is dedicated to these causes, would we be able to start one at another time?
Absolutely, and we can start it now, Ushma. I'm not saying yes or no to anything. I'm just telling you what my thoughts were around sort of the formations of committees. It's for people to meet and for gathering spaces that can sort of advance work and create community. So, except for our zoning where we just have to do it by our bylaws.
I agree with Usma from my 2-star motel outside of New York City because people are threatening me.
Okay. So,
Tom, we'll talk offline about perhaps trying to convene an event in the coming months, and then maybe we'll come back to the committee about the sort of engagement that we've gotten. And I know that we're going to continue doing these efforts, whether or not we have the moniker of a committee around it, because we're dedicated towards doing the work. But
of course, there's zero cost to us forming this committee.
Ushma, if you want to form the committee tonight, it's absolutely fine. It was my thought about it. It's just, this is a moment.
Your point is well taken, Maud. And so let us try and figure out doing the work before we codify something. And I also don't necessarily want to be held to another monthly or even quarterly meeting if that's not what is necessitated. So
I will do it myself monthly on Zoom. It's not a big commitment.
Well, yes, I think these sort of things are commitments that need to be taken seriously. So we're gonna adjourn. We're gonna wait until you and Ushma figure out your first step.
No, I'm going to put it up for a vote then. I can do that, Jennifer?
I believe my recollection of the bylaws is that we can.
I don't have the bylaws in front of me. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. My recollection of our bylaws is that you vote on the formation of a new committee, and that you and that I appoint the chair of the committee. The president of the council appoints the chair of the committee.
I move a students in temporary housing committee up for a vote. Does anybody want to vote against a committee for students in temporary housing, of which Ushma and I are already doing work to try and get them supplies? Who is against that?
I've articulated my thoughts about why I think that might not be the right time to establish that committee.
So vote no.
Do we
Can
have
I get
a
a
second
second?
on Tom's motion?
Thank you, Lon.
Okay. Vincent, will you do a roll call vote, please?
Sure, I will. On the matter of creating a committee for students in temporary housing, Eric Goldberg, have you returned?
No.
No, okay. Emily Hellstrom.
I abstain.
I will vote yes. Edward Irizarry. You're muted.
I'll vote yes.
Okay, Maud Marin.
I will abstain.
And Morden.
Vote yes.
Ushma Neal.
yes, but if this passes, I don't want to be the chair.
Okay, I do.
Do the work. I don't want to be the chair.
I do.
Len Silverman.
Yes.
Shino is not here, and Tom.
Yes.
Okay. The motion passes 6 to 6 yeses. There are no noes and 2 abstentions. So the motion passes with 6 yes votes and 2 abstentions.
I'm going to wait until next month to see who I'm going to appoint to be the chair of the Students Temporary Housing Committee, because the other member of our council who's done a lot of work on this is Shino Tanakawa, and I'm going to ask her if she's interested in chairing or being the chair of this committee.
Okay, great. She's not here. I'm doing the work right now, and you won't appoint me to the chair. Is that correct? Okay.
So moving on. Does anyone object to reestablishing the Students with Disabilities Committee?
Establishing or continuing?
Continuing.
You know, hey, Maude,
Yes.
I don't know if there is, you know, who knows what councils will come and councils will go. Part of me feels like this should be actually a permanent committee. I don't know if that's possible since it's, you know, a person is actually appointed or elected as a Students with Disabilities person. Like, I don't know if that always happens, but, and anyway, I just think it's worth looking at as a possibility.
Of what?
Just making it a permanent, not me as the chair permanently.
Right. I think that, like, I don't know if that can be done in our bylaws going forward or not. I'll look into it with the bylaws committee. As far as I understand, the only committee which requires that we have to have by our bylaws and by chancellor's regs is the zoning committee.
Zoning.
Is the only one that I think.
The bylaws that dictates what committees
got it
are standing versus ad hoc. Ad hoc comes in the end of June, and if you want to keep that committee, you have to revote it in.
Got it. Okay.
So we're going to continue the Students with Disabilities Committee, and Emily, if you'll accept it, I'm going to appoint you the chair of that committee.
Thank you.
Similarly, with the Diversity Committee, I'm going to move that we continue the Diversity Committee. If there are any objections, let me know. And similarly, Edward Irizarry, if you will continue to chair the Diversity Committee, I would appoint you chair of the Diversity Committee.
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Okay. Now,
is it possible, I'm sorry, just in the wake of Tuesday's meeting, the feedback that I got was that there was not enough time for parent engagement. And while I understand that the chancellor's meeting was directly afterwards, there did seem to be a significant appetite for holding a follow-up meeting. So is that possible, Edward and Donalda, to perhaps under the auspices of the Diversity Committee? I know that we are all zoomed out, but this does seem to be a point where our community would like very much to come together and be heard.
Yes, I don't have a problem with that. I mean, I think if we can coordinate something with NYC, once again, I think that would be the best. I would urge you to do that based on the feedback that I got from parents in my community, is that they would love to see the Diversity Committee of CEC hosting a longer engagement session for parents who were unable to comment on Tuesday. Okay, will do.
We definitely need it, and it's a really sincere regret that we didn't reschedule the date altogether. But we didn't. And so we can figure out a way to have a much longer, more open, clarified forum for folks. I think I would be delighted to do that with Ed, and thank you for bringing it up, Ushma. Also, thanks parents for the feedback. I've received it too.
I would just say in general, and thank you, Maude, for giving me props for the Students with Disabilities Committee. I was really nervous having my first meeting because I did not know what was going to happen or what set a small agenda. But I really, really encourage people who are members of the, chairs of these committees to just, even if it's not monthly, but to have a meeting that's not always a speaker, but just to have people to come to speak about whatever it is that you're chairing, only because sometimes these 2-minute, stand up and say your diatribe type thing in a committee setting can really be an important outlet for the community. So I just, and if anyone wants some ideas on how to do that and ways to start, I'm happy to discuss with anybody.
Thank you, Emily. I really appreciate that.
And I think that we're due to get information like we got tonight from the presenters about demographics and zoning. And I think if we're going to have a meeting, it should be a substantive meeting with real information so that people, instead of making these 2-minute diatribes about where they are on the issue, they can really look at the data and what is possible and what is not possible, and we can, get somewhere and we can do something. So I think if we get more of that information like we got tonight, and if Donalda helps us with, I know she spoke about the weighted measuring that she's considering now. I mean, if we get more of that concrete information, then we won't waste our time and we'll get results when we do have the meeting.
I think you both make good points. It's a great, Ed, to be substantive. And I think Emily's point is very well taken, that if we create forums where people can come and speak and you create a sense of community, there's real benefit there. So I thank you both. So
being the voice of our Twitter feed, people are gagging for data and they're gagging for that kind of information. So to the extent that we could also potentially post things on the website in advance of the meeting to allow people to review it and then come to those kinds of meetings better informed, will benefit everybody who attends.
Absolutely. Agreed. Now, the final committee, unless I'm missing anything, I'm going to appoint my...
I would like a roll call vote on the screening committee.
All right, I make a motion to dissolve.
You need a motion for each committee and who the chair is. So if you want to lump them all together, if everybody's going to agree, great. If you don't, if you're not going...
You don't need a vote on the chair of the committee. The president of the council appoints the chair of the committee. I'm sure of it from the bylaws. If anyone has them and wants to contradict me, go right ahead. But the last time I looked at the bylaws.
Sorry. Does somebody have the bylaws, Len?
I'll pull up the bylaws right now.
But do we have to do roll call vote, or can we?
No, we don't.
I thought for a new committee. So do we need a vote to establish a screening committee? That's what I want to do.
You need a vote to establish the committee, and I believe the president appoints, and it has to be approved by the council.
But it's an existing committee that was suggested.
Every year it has to be reestablished. I'm pulling up the bylaws right now.
Well, I motion for the screening committee to be...
you're just going to wait a minute on that motion because I'm going to read it.
So we need to do the roll call votes on the Students with Disability Committee for Emily and the Diversity Committee with Edward, correct? So perhaps while Maud is reading the bylaws, we can get that out of the way since it's already 9:35.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, Ushma, I can't do two things at once. So
You don't have to do a roll call vote on any of them. You could just make a motion and raise hands.
But we did on those.
So is it only a roll call vote on the ones I suggest?
No, it's the same on every one, Tom.
That's not what happened so far.
Article 5, standing and ad hoc committee. The council may create ad hoc and standing committees as it in its sole direction may determine. Committees shall be chaired or co-chaired by members of the council, which chairs shall be appointed and removed by the president with the approval of the council. Ad hoc committees shall expire no later than the 30th day of June immediately following their creation. Members of the public may serve on council committees at the request of the committee chair or chairs, with the approval of not less than a majority of whole number of council. So the council may create ad hoc and standing committees. Shall be appointed and removed by president with the approval of the council. So we don't need a roll call vote on it, but I will go back. Does everyone on the council agree to Emily Hellstrom being the chair of the Students with Disabilities?
I won't abstain like a child.
Aye.
Yes.
Everyone agrees, and if you disagree, let it be known. Edward Irizarry is the chair of the Diversity Committee. If everyone agrees, let it be known. That I see unanimous consent to that appointment. The bylaws committee. I'm going to suggest myself and Len Silverman as co-chairs of the bylaw committee. And we will eventually get it done, I promise. Not promptly, but we'll get it done. Does anyone have any objection to Len and I chairing the bylaws committee?
No
Okay.
objection.
Len,
Thank you.
Congratulations to us. We're the chairs of the bylaw committee.
If nominated, I will not run. If elected, I shall not serve. No, thank you.
The thankless commitment, thank you for doing it.
There we go. The zoning committee, which we have to do by our rules and regulations. We've had co-chairs in the past. I'd like to have co-chairs again. Is anyone else willing to step up and serve as the chair of the zoning committee? Okay, we have 3 folks, Len and Emily and Tom. So we know that we're gonna have some zoning issues potentially, because we just heard that from district planning. So why don't we,
Can I just say that the reason that I'm putting myself forward, normally I wouldn't, but since we heard from district planning that it's going to be one of the potential rezonings is around 150 in downtown. And I know those schools very, very well. And I know that community very well. That's the only reason that I'm putting myself forward for that. I just feel like if that zoning is coming up, I just think that I would have a lot to contribute. And I know a lot of the players. I know the, Tammy Meltzer,
right.
The head of Community Board 1, et cetera.
You know what I am going to do, if it's without causing too much offense, we are missing 3 of our council members, so I'm going to wait until next month to do that one as well, because we, this past year we actually didn't have any zoning matters before us, unless.
I mean, there's a lot of work to be done on zoning right now. I was co-chair last time, and I put together zoning plans. So I'd like to get started as soon as possible. If you want to delay the vote, okay.
I'm aware of that, Tom, but I am also aware, Tom, that you were the treasurer last year, and with absolutely no warning to anybody, you resigned from the treasurer, stating that you were too busy to do it. So I have some hesitation.
I was too busy to fill out your reimbursement forms and do stuff when my budget didn't even get a vote. So I'm too busy to do your busy work, but I am not too busy to do things that matter for kids.
Okay, so I'm gonna, because I think committee chairs require certain concerns around temperament, I am going to appoint Len Silverman and myself right now.
I'm going to
chair of the
withdraw
zoning
my
committee.
support for your city council run now. I've donated money to your city council run. You're gonna do that? Okay, this is on record.
Just to be super clear, I observe all of the conflict of interest rules that are in place regarding anything that I do outside of this CEC work that require conflict of interest rules, and I
now I'm going to
will
endorse
continue
your
to do
opponent.
so. I'm sure they'll be thrilled. So let's move on. We now have all of our committee chairs for our district, and with the exception of students in temporary housing, which I am going to adjourn to the following month. Moving on to our final, I believe our final
Screening
item
committee.
on the agenda.
I asked for a screening committee.
Yes, I
It's not
understand.
in this. You understand?
Okay. My position is that we should not have a screening committee because I would like to have one home which District 2 parents can come to talk about screening, and the NYCIP work is focusing on screening on a district-wide level. So that is my suggestion. I do not support the continuation of a screening committee. Tom has a motion on the floor to establish a screening committee. Does anyone give it a second?
May I say why, since you said why you don't want one again?
Yes.
I would like one because it's a very important issue to the parents in this district, and their voices should be heard. And the NYCIP program is a pilot program.
Can I make a suggestion? We don't even know if the chancellor and the DOE are going to allow screens for this year.
Which is why it's important, right?
Maybe, maybe not, because we should just wait till what the announcement is with the DOE.
Well, how about if they take away all screenings, we cancel the committee because it doesn't matter?
Ben, I'm gonna agree with you that we will adjourn the decision on whether or not to continue the screening committee or not until next month and wait for the chancellor announcement on what admissions will look like for next year.
Jennifer, do I get a vote? Or if I get a second, can I have a second from anybody?
He has a motion on the floor and can get a second.
His motion is to establish a screening committee. Does he have a second?
Reestablish the screening committee.
Can I just ask a quick question? Where do you anticipate these kinds of conversations would be housed if we didn't have a screening committee? Under the diversity committee or elsewhere? This the innocent question, honestly, like where else would we convene conversations about this?
To who? Who's that to? To Maud, I'm assuming?
Maud or anyone else?
Oh, sorry, are you speaking to me, Ushma? I thought you were speaking
Yeah,
to Tom.
sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I didn't point that at anyone, but if we did dissolve the screening committee, because this is something that parents in our district are super passionate about and none of us can agree on, I just want to know where those kinds of conversations.
So I think those kinds of conversations happen in two places. One is at our calendar meetings when there are resolutions on the record, and there have been multiple resolutions about screening, and that's where parents can come and they can be heard and they can talk about those issues. I don't think the screening committee served, and I formed it, right? And I don't think it served as full an ability as I would have liked to see it to house those conversations, in part because the NYCEP work was looking at that, you know, screening on a district-wide level. So I think that, and I think, you know, if folks, I'm so glad that we have Dr. Fergus's presentation recorded this time, because if folks can go back and look at it, notwithstanding that that meeting was somewhat acknowledged that it was somewhat rushed on Tuesday, there was a lot of really substantive information there that I do want to have a longer meeting where people can ask specific questions about it. And it's also because I'm an attorney, there are other attorneys on this council. I think folks, when you understand what the legal limitations are around some of the, you know, in the NYCEP grant, it's very explicit what you may not consider in what you may not submit, because the state isn't interested in giving us money to design an integration program that's going to be struck down by the courts. So what you're not allowed to consider and do, and what you know leads you to the disproportionality work, because it not only has this tremendous benefit of being able to identify vulnerable students in a very specific way, but it is also legal, and legal is good. So the ability to do that work and have those conversations there, I think, is really important. And I think that's where the conversations for our district should be housed in the upcoming year.
So I mean, I think Edward and Donaldo were both just talking about conspiring to continue that conversation, but one that's not necessarily, I mean, I know that the topics are inextricably linked, but is that where you would envision we would continue to have conversations about screens?
Yes, that and the calendar meetings.
Okay.
I mean, there is quite an overlap of all of these issues, and you know, we address screening when we talk about the NYCEP program and we talk about diversity. And I agree with Maud that, you know, we can address these things when, you know, in the NYCEP meetings and in our calendar meetings.
Well, at the same time, this is no additional work to anybody. And if people want to specifically talk about screens, they can do so on a Zoom call that I will set up, and none of you will have to do any work if you don't want. I don't know why you want to silence parents that want to talk about an extremely important issue in our district.
I don't want to silence any parents. Okay. I think I do not agree with your notion that it's no work to run a successful committee, Tom.
I'm going to do the work. I said no work to you.
So do we have a second for Tom's motion to create a screening committee? Okay, hearing none, we don't, that motion is not being voted upon or passed.
Okay.
So we have our committees.
Quick point, can you make Eric a co-host so that he can unmute himself?
Oh, yes, I can do that.
Because he did just return to the meeting.
Okay.
I unmuted him. I don't know how to make him a co-host.
Only I can do that because I'm the host. So we've now covered everything except the review of the superintendent evaluation. Superintendent Chumney, I don't know if you wish to stay for that or not. I mean, the evaluation, there's nothing much to say. This, for those of you, for the council members who submitted the review, the requested information according to the template in the review, I thank you very much for that. I incorporated all of that into the evaluation, which I submitted to DOE. We did believe that there was a possibility of getting an extension. We did not get that extension. So the evaluation was a little bit late, but not that late. It was much later last year. So everything that anyone sent me was included verbatim in the evaluation. So,
keeping in mind the hour, can I just say, I thought we were going to be discussing it tonight, so I didn't send anything in, but Donalda, I very much appreciated your efforts for the children and parents of this district, and also the way you present yourself and our district in our meetings. If I had known better, I would have written it down and sent that to Maud. So,
does anyone else have anything that they would like to add with regard to Superintendent Chumney and her at this point?
I do. I just wanted to thank you for all of your effort, your level-headedness, your commitment to children in our district. I too would have wrote something had I seen it, not having to deal with all these people asking me to resign because I had my friend's nephew on my lap. But I think you have been so terrific as a leader in this community. And I think that the DOE is lacking leadership right now. And it's people like you that make me want to stay in this city, to have my child go to school here. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tom. I really appreciate that. It's really an honor to work with all of you and your children. I think that I speak for all of the principals in our district when I say that we have the best jobs in the world, and it's a real dream come true to be able to live out your professional goal and to be so fulfilled with the level of work that we get to do here for kids is really, really powerful. So thank you.
Okay, I think we've already covered new business. If there is anything else, let us know now. If not, we will move to adjourn this meeting, and our working business meeting and calendar business meeting will be on August 11th at 6 p.m.
Okay. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second. Okay, good night all.
Good night, everyone.
Next meeting.